What is going on, my daredevils? It is me, MT, and welcome back to this here heavy spoiler show, y'all. Matt Murdock is back, and this time, he's black with a new set of double D's on his chest. So, let's break down all the craziness that went down in episode 1 and try to speculate where all this craziness is going to bring us by the end of the season. So let's make like a man without fear and just jump into this dang thing. Episode 1 opens with the music of the James Hunter 6 as their song Whatever It Takes plays in the background of an episode of the BB Report, hosted by journalist BB Urich, played once again by Jania Walton. And as she interviews the people of New York City about the job Mayor Wilson Fisk is doing with his anti-vigilante task force, we can see a member of the task force giving high fives to kids while wearing the Punisher skull logo on her chest, reflecting the real-life trend of police officers adopting the Punisher's logo for themselves and tarnishing what it represented to Frank Castle as they seek to punish the brave souls of New York City who dare cross Wilson Fisk's path. And it's kind of wild that they're still so enthusiastic about using the Punisher logo after Frank Castle served them a 12-pack of whoop-ass at the very end of last season, leaving a trail of dead AVTF agents in his path. However, unlike last season, this Punisher logo appears to be part of the official seal of the anti-vigilante task force, placed right over their hearts, much like the logos of their comic book counterparts, comic book Kingpin's Thunderbolt units. Introduced in the very first issue of 2021's Devil Reign story arc, Mayor Fisk's Thunderbolt units wore a circled Thunderbolt logo over their hearts instead of a Punisher logo as they hunted down the various vigilantes of New York. Then, right after this, we get a shot of a Fisk propaganda poster on the street with the words New York Born Again, brought to you by Mayor Fisk on it. And of course, the words Born Again obviously allude to the Born Again subtitle of both this show and the original Daredevil Born Again storyline from the Marvel Comics. Then after this, the episode shifts from day to night, bringing us to the scene of Daredevil's infiltration of a cargo ship called the Northern Star. And in my opinion, this Northern Star name is very fitting for the start of the series, because if you remember at the end of season 1, Daredevil compares his sensory experience to being surrounded by 1,000 stars.
Do you remember I once asked you what it was like living in the darkness? Do you remember what you said?
It's not dark. It's like 1,000 suns.
So, starting the season with Daredevil using his enhanced senses to follow a cargo ship called the Northern Star fits that theme really well. Daredevil then descends onto the ship and starts whooping ass in stealth mode, in a sequence that feels inspired by both Batman's stealth assault scene from Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins, as well as Captain Steve Rogers' assault on the Lumerian starship at the start of Captain America: The Winter Soldier. And after knocking out a few goons, Daredevil emerges into frame in a black suit while finally rocking the classic Daredevil double D's on his costume, an element that diehard fans of Daredevil in the comics have demanded ever since the character was first adapted by Netflix. This black suit is clearly inspired by Daredevil's Shadowland suit that first appeared in 2010's Shadowland #1 from writer Andy Diggle and penciler Billy Tan, and it looks pretty damn fire if you ask me. And immediately after getting rid of the resistance in his path, Daredevil uses his senses to find a shit ton of weapons that Fisk is trying to smuggle into the country from Europe. However, when he realizes that the captain of the ship has decided to sink the entire ship rather than risk discovery, Daredevil is forced to get the hell out of Dodge immediately. He starts to make his way out of there before his heightened senses point him in the direction of one of the wristwatches that one of the unconscious goons were wearing, leading us to getting yet another one of the series' iconic aspect ratio zooms, one that was achieved through the use of a system of cameras known as the three-headed monster.
It's essentially, it's a rig with 3 cameras on it. They call it the three-headed monster. And so you're basically getting roughly 180 degree of visual information. And that's where VFX does come in a little bit because they stitch the sides. And, most of the movie shot anamorphic, but this was spherical lenses so that when the aspect ratio changes, it can go as big as anyone's set they're ever going to watch.
And so then is where you feel like you are Matt Murdock, where you can hear the whole world. You can hear every sound in the whole world,
Daredevil then grabs the ticking watch and shoves it into one of the containers right before the ship plunges into the East River. A smart trick in order to be able to use his senses to locate the submerged weapons later. Eventually, Daredevil makes it back to shore extremely out of breath, and I bet that swim must have been slightly daunting for him, since we do learn in comics like 2016's Daredevil #1 that Daredevil's radar senses are severely nerfed while in water, mostly because sound travels much too fast for him to process. Then after the intro, we are brought back to Josie's bar, where we ended the last season with Matt assembling a resistance force to take on Fisk and his army of violent men with micro-peeners. The inside of Josie's bar is still as trashed as it was after Daredevil's battle with Bullseye the night that Foggy Nelson was eliminated. And before Matt greets Deborah Ann Wall's Karen Page with a kiss, we see her training with a wooden dummy, forecasting a much more badass Karen Page in the future of this season as she gains more agency to be able to defend her own self should the need arise. And she's very wise to do so because in the following scene, we see Vincent D'Onofrio's Wilson Fisk order his people to hunt down Karen Page along with Matt Murdock as he looks over the half-sunken ship in the water. And returning in their roles from last season are Michael Gandolfini as Deputy Mayor Daniel Blake, who Fisk orders to frame the cargo ship sinking as a terrorist attack orchestrated by Daredevil. We also have Hamish Allen Hadley as Task Force member Powell, who was tasked to organize a salvage team to help Fisk get his weapons back. Artie Fruscian as the enforcer Buck Cashman, who is ordered to find and eliminate the ship's captain and first mate, and Sabrina Guevara as political advisor Sheila Rivera, a character that recently appeared in the Spider-Man Brand New Day trailer, giving Spider-Man a key to the city. And I do wonder whether or not she's going to end up becoming mayor of the city by the end of this season, because it's usually the mayor that hands out keys to the city and whatnot. And of course, handing the key to the city to a rogue vigilante like Spider-Man would go directly against the mayor's anti-vigilante ideology, which causes me to suspect that Sheila will end up becoming the mayor of the city following the downfall of both Mayor Fisk and his anti-vigilante task force by the end of the season. Giving Spider-Man the key to the city could have been Homegirl's way of doing damage control after her association with such a senselessly violent administration. But anyways, after this, we are brought to a bar in Washington, D.C., not far from the United States Capitol building. And inside the bar is none other than Mr. Norval Shaggy Rogers himself, Matthew Lillard, playing the abrasive, laid-back, mysterious government agent known as Mr. Charles. The character Mr. Charles was introduced in the pages of AAFES issue number 15, a comic book series that Marvel Comics makes in collaboration with the Army and Air Force Exchange Service to highlight the efforts of the American military. In that alternate universe story, Mr. Charles plays an agent of the Roxxon Corporation who helps that company conduct illegal drilling operations in the ocean. But here we see that this Mr. Charles seems to be connected to Julia Louis-Dreyfus's Contessa Valentina Allegra de Fontaine, who we know is both the head of the United States Central Intelligence Agency while also being connected to the sketchy Ox organization, the same people responsible for nearly turning New York City into a dark hellscape by unleashing the fruits of their Project Sentry onto the world through the incredibly unstable Bob Reynolds. And while we don't exactly know what Val's motivations are for calling Mr. Charles and ordering him to assist Mayor Fisk, we do know that the Ox Group will at least have some presence in this season of the show, because when Marvel Studios released the first teaser trailer for this season, we can actually see a shipping container with the Ox Group logo on it as Jessica Jones bashes some security goon with a big-ass door. So whatever Mr. Charles is doing for Val in this season, it most likely is a mission that will benefit both Val and the Ox Group at the end of the day. But a little bit more on that later. But yeah, we then get another BB report set to the song Hula Gang by Joey Valence and Bray, a report that highlights Fisk's effort to clean up both the East River and the streets of New York. And watching the report at Josie's is Karen Page, who then expresses her frustration about Fisk's seemingly bulletproof political position. She then gets a lead on the names of the Cypriot captain and first mate that were on the boat, leading Matt to immediately go on a no-vision quest to find them. And as Matt goes to check that lead out, we transition to the office of Mayor Fisk, where we see him get a visit from both New York's Lieutenant Governor Juan Gomez, played by Lenny Platt, as well as State Attorney General Steve Rudd, played by actor Ty Jones. The two of them attempt to call out the mayor for his extreme anti-vigilante initiative that seeks life sentences for any and all New York vigilantes, which is absolutely nuts. Like, imagine spending the rest of your life in prison just because you hit a thug while wearing a unitard that you bought from Amazon.com. Insanity. The state attorney general then mentions how there are a series of vigilante trials coming up soon that the public is sure to scrutinize, giving plenty of work for Kirsten McDuffy and her team over at Murdoch and McDuffy. However, just when these two men are about to enforce some major oversight on Fisk's operation, in comes Mr. Charles from Langley, Virginia, the home of Contessa Val's CIA headquarters. And Mr. Charles's arrival would be accompanied by a phone call from Contessa Val herself, who orders the state attorney general to assist Mayor Fisk with anything that he desires. Again, while it's unclear exactly what Contessa Val hopes to gain from her alliance with Wilson Fisk, I feel like it definitely has something to do with her overall goal of consolidating power for the United States. Ever since we first met her in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Val has been working on the low to gather as many resources as she can in order to make sure that the United States is always on top when it comes to the never-ending global arms race, an arms race that has been a staple of the MCU ever since Tony Stark was attacked for his Jericho missiles in the first Iron Man film. In the Falcon and the Winter Soldier series, we saw her attempt to secure both the super soldier John Walker as well as Captain America's vibranium shield in order to use them for the government. Then, in Black Panther Wakanda Forever, we saw Val seek out Riri Williams' vibranium detecting machine and begin talking about plans to destabilize Wakanda in a quest to hoard all of the vibranium in the world for America. And of course, we learned in the Thunderbolts movie how Val and her AUX organization were experimenting on a number of unwitting test subjects for Project Sentry in order to recreate and surpass all the super soldier programs before that created enhanced beings like Captain Steve Rogers, the Incredible Hulk, Man-Thing from Werewolf by Night, as well as super soldiers like John Walker and the Flag Smashers. And this is all, of course, before she would be forced to recruit the Thunderbolts team to be the government-sanctioned New Avengers, a team of living weapons that she can use as the government's attack dogs against any other group of enhanced individuals that threaten the country. And this, of course, makes sense considering Valentina's childhood trauma that we learned about in the Thunderbolts movie, when she accidentally was exposed to one of Bob's fear-based void visions. Because after witnessing her father get gunned down by someone that he once considered to be a friend, Val has seemingly adopted this belief that the world is full of bad people and worse people, and that she needs to embrace doing bad things in order to keep America safe from people that she and her political elites deem as national security risks. This all being said, Val's desire to acquire these weapons will very much align with her desire to make sure that America always has the biggest stick in the world. She could very well be smuggling in these weapons in order for criminals to create more chaos in New York, just so Fisk's brutal anti-vigilante task force could act as a model that could be replicated on a federal and national level with organizations like Damage Control. Or she could be wanting to bring these weapons into the country in order to prepare for that Wakanda destabilization mission that the United States president wanted to execute during the events of Wakanda Forever. But this time using the New Avengers and Bob along with her government agents to get it done. A move that would of course not fly with Bucky Barnes, who loves Wakanda. And hell, maybe we might even see Val and the government use these weapons in order to perform a siege on the people of New Asgard as well. Much like we saw during the Siege storyline from Marvel Comics in 2010. Who knows, only time will tell there. But yeah, not long after this, we are shown one of Karen Page's wanted posters that reads, "Wanted for aiding and abetting a vigilante. Karen Page, female, white, blonde hair, blue eyes, 5 feet 9 inches tall, last seen at the courtroom trial of New York City Mayor Wilson Fisk." The anti-vigilante task force is endeavoring to locate and apprehend the above-pictured individual, last seen wearing civilian clothing. So, with her face plastered all over New York, Karen is forced to walk around wearing a brunette wig when she goes to pick up information from her informants. We then catch up with Tony Dalton's Jack Duquesne after being put in a cage by Fisk's fascist regime at the end of season 1 for his actions as the vigilante known as the Swordsman. Interviewing Swordsman is Mayor Fisk's Commissioner of Mental Health, Heather Glenn, played once again by Margarita Levieva. However, Heather's impartiality while conducting Jack's mental evaluation will go right out the window when she starts seeing the ghost of her former psychotic patient Muse in the reflection on the door behind him. And the cinematography in this show is cooking for real, because I love how the show has the camera tilt slightly every time Heather Glenn starts to internally relive her trauma from being attacked and tortured by Muse. It really makes it look like she is truly teetering on the edge, appearing as if she's leaning back so far in her chair that she is about to fall over into true madness. And back over at the offices of missing Murdoch and McDuffy, Nikki M. James's Kirsten asks Clark Johnson's Detective Cherry to attempt to find the people kidnapped by Fisk's task force, before asking him if he has any leads on Matt. Cherry continues lying to her, even though he knows damn well where to find Matt's blind behind. And I feel super bad for Kirsten being kept out of the loop here, because she straight up deserves to be part of Daredevil's anti-vigilante task force. Even though she's not a vigilante herself, she's still very much a hero in her own right, with Cherry even comparing her desire to assist clients affected by Fisk's policies to the biblical hero David fighting the giant Goliath. And that takes courage and strength, man, the kind that would lend itself well to Matt's secret underground resistance. Like, the day that Kirsten finds out that everybody has been keeping her out of the loop, that girl is gonna be pissed and might even stop being friends with Matt Murdock forever. And honestly, I wouldn't even blame her, especially after he left her the burden of running their law firm all by herself. I mean, look at her desk. It is absolutely covered in coffee cups and energy drinks, along with some painkillers and vitamins, showing that she's been working long hours around the clock just to make sure that the most vulnerable people in New York have representation. But anyways, when Cherry gets a 2:17 p.m. text from Matt during his conversation with Kirsten, we can see that he has Matt labeled as Easy Resi in his phone, as Matt appears to communicate meetups with Cherry by pretending to be a restaurant called the Red Kitchen, confirming a reservation. District Attorney Hochberg's corrupt ass then enters the office to try to get Kirsten to join the dark side over at the DA's office, but she just gives him the old fingeroony. And Detective Chairbear has a meeting of his own with Matt, who asks him to look into the missing captain and first mate of the Northern Star. But unfortunately, it would be much too late for boat captain Achilleo, as Powell and his team would bust into the Aegean Gardens Greek cuisine restaurant and apprehend Achilleo after punching the female restaurant owner, hiding him in the face, in front of all of her customers, showing just how emboldened the AVTF has become with zero oversight. That restaurant worker, Ariana, is played by actress Annie Parise, who actually played the wife of scientist Kurt Connors in the first Amazing Spider-Man movie before that production would cut all of her scenes for the movie entirely. Later on in the episode, we would see Achilleo brought to a secret AVTF holding facility where Powell sadistically tortures him for funsies. But what's kind of interesting about this moment is how Buck Cashman would intervene and call Powell out for his gleeful violence and admonish him for not exercising restraint in his interrogation technique. Buck would then proceed to take over and make false assurances to Achilleo that he would be able to return home to his family before sending a bullet flying through the back of his head. And the reason why I find that moment interesting is because Buck seems genuinely bummed out that he had to get rid of this boat worker who did his job perfectly, showing a more empathetic side of the character that we did not see in season 1. And it kind of makes me wonder if Buck is going to be down with the deal that Wilson and Vanessa make with Mr. Charles later on in the episode, when Mr. Charles tells Fisk that they'll be forced to execute everybody on the covert salvage team that manages to retrieve the sunken weapons. And if Buck is involved with overseeing that operation, I do wonder if we'll see him attempt to stop Fisk from doing so. That would definitely be a bit of a surprising move by Buck for sure. And after this, we are shown another BB Report Street interview that is suddenly interrupted with a transmission from a mysterious figure in a Fisk mask, a parody of the videos that infamous internet hacking group Anonymous would make while wearing the mask of the radical Guy Fawkes. While attempting to expose the BB Report for the propaganda that it is, we get a couple of music tracks in the background, including Sam Fontaine's Statue of Liberty, as well as the famous Bad Boy song from Inner Circle that acted as the theme song for the popular Cops TV show. And even though this mysterious individual straight up trashes BB Urich and seemingly makes fun of her dead uncle Ben Urich, part of me feels that the person in this Fisk mask is actually BB Urich herself. I mean, last season we did learn that she was only working with Fisk in order to try to bring him to justice for the murder of her uncle, and that she sometimes produces news content under different pseudonyms. So there is a chance that this particular persona was created by BB in order to let people know that the BB report has been heavily influenced by a Mayor Fisk attempting to hide all the illegal activity that he's been up to. The rap song Danger by Marco Polo and Torre plays during the transition to Daniel Blake's housewarming party. And ironically enough, this song was also featured in another comic book adaptation centered around costume vigilantes, the 2013 Kick-Ass 2 movie. Daniel Blake can be seen wearing a Knicks hoodie when he greets BB at his party. And after learning that Fisk helped him get his new place, BB tells him that it's unethical for Fisk to still have dealings with his old businesses and that he should be careful. But Daniel straight up ignores her like the dingus that he is. Later on, after BB hires cleaners to clean up after the party, we can see a poster for The Godfather over Daniel's fireplace, the only thing that he has decorated on his walls. He even put a little tiny spotlight on that poster too, showing how much he pictures himself as a character in his own Godfather movie starring Wilson Fisk. Then a little bit later, we catch up with Heather Glenn, who is writing up notes on her meeting with Swordsman when she gets a call from Hawkberg, who stands in front of a vending machine with an AVTF poster on it. The poster has a picture of an eagle spotting a vigilante with the text, "If you see something, say something," encouraging the public to snitch on unsanctioned heroes using their 24-hour hotline. The use of an eagle for this poster is fitting, considering that the logo for the AVTF that we see at the top of Karen Page's wanted poster earlier has an eagle placed on top of a shield. And while Hawkberg encourages Heather to fudge Swordsman's answers to make him look like an actual sociopath, a vision of Muse appears in front of her yet again, triggering her anger towards all masked vigilantes. And this would, of course, lead her to begin falsifying Swordsman's answers, implying that Swordsman answered true to the statement, "Evil spirits possess me at times." An ironic action considering how it is actually Heather that is actually the mentally ill one, having evil spirits from her past possessing her to be a more corrupt mental health commissioner. And I really love how even though Muse died in season 1, his influence is still very much affecting the people of New York. And that's pretty much what every artist hopes for after they die, for their art to move and change people. So I am sure that Muse would be ecstatic to see Heather so scarred by his attempt at art. Then we head back to Josie's bar, where Matt brings up his old mentor Stick while beating up a wooden dummy, before him and Karen reminisce about the good old days of Nelson, Murdoch, and Page, wishing that they could be involved in defending the disenfranchised during the upcoming vigilante trials. But yeah, after this, back at the Greek restaurant, Ariana comes across first mate Christophe and agrees to give him shelter, before the episode ends with Detective Cherry having a heart attack after being beat up by some AVTF agents as the song Gee Whiz Look at His Eyes by Carla Thomas plays in the background. And during their interrogation, they ask him why he's looking into the sailors, before Daredevil rushes onto the scene and starts blindly kicking ass to try to save him. But despite Matt's best efforts, he would ultimately be held down and unmasked, forced to listen to Cherry's heartbeat fade away, just like he did with Foggy during the season 1 premiere. However, before Matt could suffer any consequences for his exposed identity, his nemesis Bullseye would come out of nowhere to save the day, before leaving a "you're welcome" note on his knife for Daredevil to read should he suddenly be healed of his blindness one day. And I genuinely wonder what could be motivating Bullseye to help out his nemesis Daredevil this season. I mean, why not just toss a knife through Matt Murdock's head after the task force removed his mask? Well, part of me is thinking that Bullseye wants Matt Murdock to stay alive just so he can be a pain in the ass for Wilson and Vanessa Fisk. But judging by comments made by Bullseye actor Wilson Bethel ahead of the season, Bullseye will be on a bit of a twisted journey of redemption this season. So saving Daredevil from the anti-vigilante task force may be his way for apologizing for everything he's done. Who knows? I personally would love to see a scenario where Daredevil and Bullseye are forced to team up with one another. Like, the closest that we ever got to something like that was when we got that dope three-way fight between Daredevil, Bullseye, and Kingpin at the end of Netflix Daredevil Season 3. What's good, my Daredevils? It's me, MT, and welcome back to the Heavy Spoiler Show. Marvel Studios has blessed us by releasing episodes 2 and 3 of Daredevil Born Again in one night. So y'all already know that we here at Heavy Spoilers have got you covered on the breakdown. So let's fearlessly jump on into this thing. Episode 2 starts with a mysterious graffiti artist spray painting Daredevil's iconic Double D logo on a wall. Later on in the episode, during one of City Without Fear's YouTube videos, we can see that these spray painted D's have been turned into the R's of the words resist and rebel. We can also see that they've also graffitied over the art of Lady Liberty, making her look sick at the mayor's fascist influence by putting X's over her eyes and a frown over her mouth. We then see Daredevil on the roof of Detective Cherry's building, watching Cherry be carried away by medical professionals and driven to Metro General Hospital following his heart attack at the end of episode 1. Matthew Murdock being on the roof of a building while watching a dying friend from below echoes what we saw happen at the beginning of the Born Again series with the death of Foggy Nelson. But luckily, it seems like Detective Cherry will be okay. We are then brought into the interior of a church, where Wilson Bethel's Benjamin Poindexter stands at the front, with his head purposely framed in the center of a cross. And like I mentioned last week in my breakdown of episode 1, Bullseye actor Wilson Bethel did mention that Bullseye will be going on some sort of a redemption journey this season. So framing his head in front of the Christian symbol for the great Redeemer, Jesus Christ, is symbolically fitting here. He then tells the priest in training that he's looking for Sister Maggie Grace, the mother of Matt Murdock, played by actress Joanne Whalley, who worked as a nun at Clinton Church in the Netflix Daredevil series. And when he's told that Maggie is currently in Rome on a sabbatical, Poindexter then requests some type of absolution for betraying others and himself, before the entire scene is covered in a blue hue, an element that was brilliantly introduced in the first season that allows the entire scene to feel like it's being swallowed by Poindexter's creepy influence. And of course, the color blue is associated with Bullseye in the comics, as that is the color of his suit. This being said, while it is for sure concerning that someone as twisted as Bullseye is looking for Sister Maggie Grace specifically at first, part of me feels like he truly wanted to visit her in order to ask for her forgiveness for how his actions have negatively affected her in the past, with the most notable of these actions being the murder of Father Paul Lantom. But who knows what's going on in that creepy-ass mind of his.
His knees look like they would buckle in, his tribulations caused by a penguin.
After this, we see Mayor Fisk training for a big fight night coming up, before we see him absolutely launch his boxing trainer into a mirrored wall, instantly killing him. But in the mayor's defense, he did get some bad news, because it turns out old Benny Crazy Eyes is back on the scene, and Mayor Fisk is understandably nervous as hell considering how he was almost assassinated by Mr. Poindexter last season before Matt Murdock took that bullet like a champ. I mean, a bit of a dumbass champ considering that he should have let that evil Humpty Dumpty die, but hey, a champ nonetheless. But the good news is you can dress like a champ by shopping at the Heavy Spoilers merch store over at heavyspoilers.shop. We've got all sorts of fun merch inspired by all the best TV and movie properties that you love, like our new Eco Dino and Worthy Opponent shirts inspired by both Dinosaurus and Battle Beast from Amazon's Invincible. Or if you're a fan of noir-style action, you can pick up our Pulp Noir double-sided tee to watch this Spider-Man Noir TV show in. But if sailing the high seas with the homies is more your thing, then our Freedom double-sided tee, inspired by One Piece, would definitely look good on your body. You can find all that and so much more over at the Heavy Spoilers merch store, so be sure to stop on by today. Then after the intro, we head back to Matt and Karen's secret hideout in a back room of Josie's bar, where the two of them come to the conclusion that Bullseye only spared Daredevil's life in order for him to take the fall for the murders of all those AVTF members. And of course, the more agents that Bullseye manages to kill, the more he angers Fisk in the process on his road to potentially getting true vengeance on Fisk later on. However, right when Matt and Karen decide to head to Astoria in order to locate the first mate of the sunken cargo ship full of weapons before the AVTF gets to him, we are brought outside of the Aegean Gardens Greek cuisine restaurant, where we witness the arrest of Good Samaritan Ariana for her involvement in hiding the captain of the Northern Star in her restaurant. Luckily, the task force did not end up finding first mate Christophe hiding out in the restaurant as well. Then we head on over to the mayor's office, where Buck Cashman asks Fisk why he doesn't tell everybody that Matt Murdock is Daredevil, which is honestly a really good question to ask, and I am surprised that he has not asked this question sooner. But then again, Buck Cashman knows what happens to people who ask Fisk too many questions, so I guess I can't really blame him for holding that in for so long. But Fisk has a really smart reply. He knows that it's far easier to sell the demon-themed Daredevil as a villainous figure than it would be to sell Matt Murdock as one. Because not only has Matt Murdock done so much good for the people of New York City through his work as a lawyer, but he is also known as the selfless lawyer that saved the mayor's life. But Buck's question would then inspire the mayor to then recruit the people of New York City to find his hero, Matt Murdock, for him, so he can give that blind bastard a big old bear hug, a hug that would undoubtedly turn Matt's spine into a fine, powdery substance. And during the mayor's public address to the city to keep an eye out for Matt, we can see a poster in the mayor's office with information on Matt Murdock's appearance and his last whereabouts. It lists Matt's height as being 5 foot 10 inches tall, having dark brown hair and brown eyes, and being a 170-pound white male that is blind and uses a cane. And then on the right side, we can see the words "last seen." Matt Murdock attended the mayor's gala at Gracie Mansion, where he heroically saved the Mayor Fisk's life by blocking an assassin's bullet, but was himself critically injured. And then under that, we get a 555 Murdock phone number for the 24-hour hotline that the mayor dedicated specifically for finding Matt. And a little bit after this, we are brought to the office of Deputy Mayor of Communications, Daniel Blake. And you can tell that it's his office because of the post-it note on his door that he wrote himself. It's kind of funny how nobody has bothered to make him an official door sign yet, and how they shoved him in an office that seems to be tucked away from the rest of humanity. In his office, both he and Sheila watch an anonymous YouTuber in a Fisk mask mock the mayor for losing his illegal shipment of weapons to the East River courtesy of that dastardly do-gooder Daredevil. And we can see that Daniel Blake is a big fan of New York sports, as a cup themed after the New York Jets American football team can be seen on his desk, while a necklace with the New York Jets logo can be seen directly behind him hanging on a wall. And across from that wall, we could also see that he's hung a pennant for the New York Knicks basketball team. Also in Daniel's office are some of the old Fisk for Mayor campaign items, including an old poster on his cabinets and a blue foam Fisk fist on the wall behind his desk. And after watching the video titled "Daredevil Sunk My Boat," Sheila advises that Daniel tell the mayor about it immediately, as it features footage of Daredevil picking up one of the cameras on the cargo ship, footage that only a small people within Fisk's circle would have access to. Daniel then tries to encourage her by downplaying the impact of this mysterious figure's videos before denying that he ever stored the footage of Daredevil's infiltration on his laptop, a Microsoft laptop that inexplicably is running a Mac operating system. Seems like a bit of a mistake on the part of the production here. But surprise, surprise, Danny's dumbass was lying the entire time and actually did have the footage on his laptop, a big no-no that could get him in trouble with Mayor Kingpin. And later in the episode, while in Wilson Fisk's office, the mayor would confront him over the leaked footage and threaten him by showing him the dead body of former police commissioner Phil Gallo, whose head Wilson Fisk squeezed like a stress ball before framing his death as an accidental car crash. The mayor would also go on to tell Daniel that Commissioner Gallo had a bloody calling card in his pocket with the masked troll's handle on it, at City Without Fear. City Without Fear is of course the last words that we hear from the Man Without Fear himself at the very end of Daredevil Born Again Season 1, when he says the words, "This is our city, not his. We can take it back. Together, the weak, the strong, all of us resist, rebel, rebuild, because we are the city without fear." Mayor Fisk then orders Daniel to find whoever leaked the Daredevil footage before pressing him on where his loyalties lie, with Daniel reassuring him that he is still very much the mayor's #1 brown-noser extraordinaire. But anyways, backtracking a bit, after having a meeting with Mayor Fisk, where he promises to up the mayor's security and find and or kill Matt Murdock, Officer Powell runs into his old buddy Cole North, played by Jeremy Isaiah Earl, who we last saw get his shit absolutely rocked by both Daredevil and the Punisher in Matt's old apartment at the end of the last season. Eager to get his revenge, North begs Powell to let him back on the task force, a request that Powell seems to reluctantly agree to. And after being instructed by Mayor Fisk to pay a recovering Cherry a visit at Metro General, he sends 2 AVTF agents straight there. Metro General Hospital is of course a hospital that has appeared in a number of times in MCU history, serving as the same hospital that Doctor Strange used to work at before his bones in his hands got big time crunched in a car accident, as well as being the same hospital that Rosario Dawson's Claire Temple worked at as a nurse for a time in Netflix Marvel TV series. It's a fictional hospital that actually made its first appearance in the pages of 1972's Night Nurse No. 1. And as these agents walk into Cherry's room, they immediately insult both Cherry and his friend McDaniel by calling them dinosaurs from the Jurassic Park movies. McDaniel, played by actor Ed Kirsten, fires back by making fun of the AVTF's uniform, asking them if they plan on wearing underwear on the outside like comic book characters Superman, Batman, and Robin. But it would ultimately be Bullseye who lands the final insult on the AVTF officers when he sends some projectiles flying through their brains. And hearing that his men were brutally eliminated, Powell heads to Cherry's room himself, only to find that Cherry and everybody inside have mysteriously vanished, likely raptured into the sky by our Lord Jesus Christ himself. Just kidding, he was actually saved by Angie Kim, played once again by actress Ruibo Chien. With Bullseye clearly being the culprit of the murders, Mayor Fisk orders Powell to increase his wife's security for her upcoming dinner at Gracie Mansion. The show then switches on over to Vanessa Fisk herself as she talks with Buck Cashman about Bullseye while also selecting a gun to use for her own protection, because girl is freaked the hell out. And I don't know about you guys, but their conversation feels oddly flirtatious, almost like Vanessa Fisk wants to jump on Buck Cashman's bones, just like she did when she cheated on Wilson with Adam the artist, a man that she would end up killing herself after he was tortured by the mayor for touching her. So if Vanessa is indeed subtly flirting with him, then Cash Money Bucky should watch the fuck out and stay in his lane before he ends up taking a trip through the looking glass, if you know what I mean. And before her dinner event, we do see Vanessa have a conversation with her husband in front of a mirror, asking him why he takes such a risk with the Northern Star cargo retrieval efforts. Fisk responds that he wishes to do good beyond just New York City, which causes me to suspect that both he and Contessa Val might be planning to use these military weapons to help supply anti-superhuman initiatives across the country through organizations like Damage Control, the CIA, or Val's Ox Group. I mean, in the Spider-Man Brand New Day trailer that just dropped, we can see a series of armed personnel get possessed by a mind-controlling antagonist. Maybe these weapons that we see in their hands are the same weapons that the mayor is trying to smuggle in. Who knows? But one part of their conversation that was particularly notable to me happens when Vanessa asks Wilson how many more worlds that he seeks to conquer, with Wilson replying by asking,
How many are there?
Obviously, this is just Wilson Fisk expressing his desire to expand his influence over more than just New York City. But this line also seems like a tongue-in-cheek nod towards the MCU multiverse and the multitude of worlds due to collide during the events of Avengers Doomsday. And apparently, Vanessa's dinner party later that night is one focused on healing from the actions dealt by people like the White Tiger and Muse, hosted by Heather Glenn herself. Afterwards, Vanessa pulls Heather aside and begins talking about how Heather's relationship with Matt Murdock ended. An element in the background that I found interesting during their conversation is this painting positioned between the two of them. It seemed to be a painting of two faces, a red face with black eyes and a black face with red eyes.
We each got a face, two faces.
I think it's too much of a thinker.
The red face appears to be standing behind the black one while looking at them through the side of their eye, while the black figure stares towards the viewer. I feel like this painting is brilliantly symbolic of Heather Glenn's overall struggle with her own declining mental health, as she continues to have the ghost of Muse fuel her fear and hatred towards vigilantes. Because in my opinion, this black figure represents Heather Glenn, while the figure in red, looking behind them, represents the blood painter Muse himself, whispering in Heather's ear. Heather then asks Vanessa if she believes that Matthew was actually murdered by a masked figure such as the Punisher Frank Castle or even Daredevil, to which Vanessa truthfully replies, no, because she knows damn well that Matt Murdock is still alive. However, while Heather gloats about how easy it is staying 2 steps ahead of all of the vigilantes of New York, Vanessa Fisk suddenly gets the feeling like she's being watched, almost like Homegirl felt a disturbance in the dark side of the force or something. But even though she eventually shakes it off, her feelings would be proven right as we see none other than Benjamin Poindexter stalking the two of them from afar. Meanwhile, Karen and Matt stake out the salvage operation when Matt comes to the conclusion that he's gotta infiltrate the port as Daredevil, describing the port as a black hole. An interesting choice of words, considering that Daredevil's perspective while he walks around New York City is like being surrounded like 1,000 suns. A quote that I love because it not only reflects Matt's superhuman perspective, but it also compares the resilient people of New York to shining stars as well. So referring to this port as a black hole is an apt description, as it is the very opposite of Daredevil's city of persistently shining stars. Over in another part of New York, we catch up with Angela Del Toro, played once again by Camila Rodriguez. And while walking down the street with her aunt Soledad, played by actress Ashley Marie Ortiz, the two of them talk about Angela's uncle Hector Ayala, played by the late Camar de los Reyes, who died on December 24th, 2023 from cancer. Hector was of course murdered by the police after his identity as the superpowered vigilante White Tiger was exposed following a high-profile murder trial last season. The widowed Soledad wonders if things would have been different if her husband had never assumed the identity of White Tiger, but her niece Angela assures her that her husband did the right thing because heroes like him save people's lives, much like how Daredevil would save her life from being taken by the serial killer Muse. Angela's admirations for heroes like her uncle and Daredevil will undoubtedly inspire her to adopt the White Tiger title for herself later on in the season, much like her comic book counterpart started wearing the necklace in the pages of 2005's Daredevil number 78, as well as 2006's White Tiger series. MCU Angela Del Toro is much younger than the Angela in the comics, as comic book Angela had a whole career at the FBI before quitting to follow in the footsteps of Hector Ayala as the White Tiger following his murder. However, their night would quickly spiral out of control when Angela's aunt is arrested for battery on an officer for just trying to keep an AVTF agent from hurting an innocent convenience store owner. Seeing her mother carted off by the fascist regime, Angela would later go seek the help of Kirsten McDuffy at Murdoch and McDuffy, who we see wearing a Stanford University sweater, likely implying that she went there for college. And coincidentally enough, Murdoch and McDuffy is also where her father's old White Tiger amulet is being kept, the same amulet that allowed its wearer to become a superpowered avatar of the White Tiger God, very much in the same way that whoever is worthy to hold Thor's hammer is granted the powers of the god Thor. Meanwhile, Daniel attempts to interrogate his friend BB through the guise of a thank you dinner, as he suspects that it was her who leaked the Daredevil footage to this mysterious City Without Fear guy, not knowing that this masked mocker of mayors is none other than BB Urick herself, something that I actually theorized in my episode 1 breakdown. We see her hand Commissioner Gallo this very calling card in season 1 before he has his head squeezed. So the Fisk administration has to figure that whoever this City Without Fear person is, they had to have been there the night of the gala to give Commissioner Gallo that card before he was killed. And speaking of Commissioner Gallo, when Sheila goes into Fisk's office to give him something, she spots Gallo's file on his desk, causing her to feel immense guilt for being the one to get him killed after snitching to Fisk about his intent to report Fisk's illegal activities to the governor and Supreme Court of New York. And even though we see Sheila falling in line with Fisk now, I have a strong feeling this guilt that she feels right now will lead her to betraying him later on, because deep down in her heart of hearts, she knows what Fisk is doing is evil and wrong. And Commissioner saw that potential within Sheila as well. And over at Josie's, Matt and Karen share a drink with Josie herself, played once again by actress Susan Varon. Josie would get a knock on the door from Angie Kim, who uses code to let her know that Cherry is being held in a safe location by the Resistance. And after this, we see another transmission from BB's City Without Fear persona, as they call out Kingpin for using his anti-vigilante task force to round up the mayor's personal enemies. And during this video, we see imagery of someone holding a blue pill and a red pill in each hand, echoing the iconic scene from the 1999 Matrix film where Morpheus has Neo choose between living comfortably in oppression and living free in rebellion. And the themes of blue and red would continue when we're brought to the Fisk family bedroom, as Vanessa's paranoia about Bullseye being on the loose causes her to have a blue-tinted nightmare, one that starts with a blue rose, much like the blue rose that we saw Bullseye staring at in his cell at the start of season 1, episode 8 of Daredevil Born Again. However, that rose would turn back to its normal red color once Vanessa wakes up from her dream. But right before Bullseye domes Vanessa in the actual nightmare, a baseball actually rolls up to Vanessa's feet, pointing to Bullseye's first ever murder weapon back when he murdered his baseball coach out of rage, a moment that we see recreated in season 3, episode 5 of Netflix's Daredevil. She also tells Bullseye in her nightmare that she knows why he's out to get her, again implying that she believes that Bullseye is pissed that she took him off his meds to be her assassin, only to leave him to rot in prison when he was caught. And when she awakens, she tells her husband Wilson that she hopes that one day they'll both be satisfied with what they've amassed and be able to retire somewhere peaceful, preferably away from blind lawyers with ninja training and psycho murderers with incredible aim. And over at Josie's place, Matt and Karen attempt to connect in their own way by dancing to Love Makes a Woman by Barbara Acklin. However, their dancing will be cut short by the sudden arrival of the AVTF, who have somehow gotten a tip that Matt was staying there. Both Matt and Karen do their fair share of ass kicking to avoid getting caught, but it's only Karen who actually manages to kidnap one of these agents. And the episode then ends with a shot of that captured agent in a secret location. But not just any secret location, it is the hideout of one Frank Castle, aka the Punisher, the very same hideout that we saw for the first time last season. Episode 3 is titled The Scales and the Sword, a reference to the symbolic Lady Justice figure, the symbolic personification of American justice. As most of you probably know, Lady Justice is often depicted as a blindfolded woman having a balanced scale in her left hand and a sword in her right hand. The blindfold is meant to reflect how the American justice system should ideally be completely unbiased, while her scales are meant to reflect how justice is meant to be equal across the board, regardless of who you are, and the sword itself is meant to represent the power and authority of the law to enforce that justice. And it is a clever episode title for sure, considering how Daredevil himself is blind while continuously seeking true, authoritative, and impartial justice to dictate the fate of all those who break the law, while also reflecting the two main events of this episode. The scales, of course, represent the vigilante trials, which were anything but unbiased due to the corruption of the prosecution and the judges, while the sword, of course, points to the swordsman and how he finally gets himself a badass fight scene this episode when Daredevil comes to free his ass from rotting in a dog cage all day. But anyways, the episode begins with the agents of the anti-vigilante task force walking the streets of New York City like the goofy tools that they are. And after that, we get a shot of a man on a bike riding past some red graffiti on the ground that says resist, while also riding past one of the many posters for the big fight between Mayor Fisk and a boxer named Matterhorn. The poster actually reads, "Scrappin' in the kitchen, Mayor Fisk versus Matterhorn in 3 rounds of fury, a charity event for the benefit of the New York Born Again Revitalization Project. Be there or the mayor will crush your head." We can also see that the streets are covered in Fisk U graffiti as well, like the kind that we can see in front of the subway, as well as on this basketball court sign that reads, "Courts are closed to group play. In accordance with the Safer Streets Initiative, all outdoor activities are suspended," before throwing a link to nyc.gov/Mayor Fisk/Anti-Vigilante Task Force, a page that, of course, doesn't actually exist in real life because it's actually run by the New York City government. Then we are brought back to one of the Punisher's old safe houses that we first saw back in season 1. Karen Page, being the blonde badass that she is, managed to beat and bag an anti-vigilante task force agent after the group attempted to eliminate the two of them at Josie's at the end of the last episode. Karen attempts to convince Matt that she senses something truly different about this particular agent than the other, more ruthless AVTF goons out there. But Matt is concerned that Karen is becoming more like their buddy Frank Castle. The agent, whose name is revealed to be Alan Saunders, tells the two of them that he's interested in joining the resistance because Powell and the Power Trip Patrol are out of their damn mind, with Daredevil detecting that he's telling the truth with his special ears. And I love how the show included a character like Alan to this season because it shows us that there are a number of people within the anti-vigilante task force that aren't as corrupt as assholes like Officer Powell or Cole North. They're just people who joined because they truly believe that they needed to address a growing threat to the city of New York. And I kind of don't blame them because Mayor Fisk and Deputy Mayor of Communications Daniel Blake are doing a fantastic job with spreading anti-vigilante propaganda throughout New York City through compromised outlets like the BB Report. So it stands to reason that there are a number of genuinely good police officers that have signed up for the mayor's task force, not knowing that it was truly an extension of the mayor's fascist overreach. Not only that, but Alan's inclusion in this episode also serves to justify Daredevil's strict no-killing policy when it comes to the anti-vigilante task force, because the last thing that he wants to do is send a brainwashed and misled citizen of New York to the Shadow Realm just because they wanted to do some good and have found themselves in too deep. And behind Daredevil during this interrogation is the wall that Frank Castle used to track all of his targets, throwing a red X over their faces once they've been disposed of. And above all of those photos, we can see the words, "For the fallen many, your sacrifice becomes our purpose. A quote that Frank wrote up there to show that he is fueled by seeking justice for those who have fallen due to injustice and crime, like his own dead wife and kids, who will never come back. Thank God Frank Castle isn't real, because he would definitely kill me for that one. Daredevil detects that Alan is telling the truth before Alan gives the two of them an AVTF access card. And on that card, we can get a better look at the SHIELD-themed AVTF logo. An eagle can be seen with its wings spread, holding a sword in one hand and a lightning bolt in the other, representing swift and righteous strength and power. The design of the lightning bolt itself seems to be a nod towards the SS lightning bolts that the members of Hitler's Schutzstaffel paramilitary organization used, with this organization having provided personal protection to Adolf Hitler and other Nazi Party leaders before ultimately expanding into a massive organization that rounded people up and tortured them in concentration camps. The entire eagle emblem itself on this AVTF logo feels very reminiscent of Hitler's imperial eagle symbol, which featured an eagle holding a wreath with a swastika at the center. Then after the intro, we then watch Heather Glenn stare at a crack that she made in her wall after using too much force attempting to hammer a nail in it, symbolizing how Heather's growing inner aggression is causing her own self to start to crack. And because of this, Heather starts having a panic attack, once again experiencing the emotions associated with her having been traumatized by the painter serial killer Muse last season. Heather then opens up a drawer to reveal that she owns the mask formerly owned by Muse. Heather seems to purposely whip this mask out in order to give herself a bit of exposure therapy, a treatment technique where individuals gradually confront traumatic memories, scary situations, or triggering objects in a controlled setting to reduce their anxiety responses over time. By repeatedly exposing herself to her source of fear, Heather hopes to gain control over her emotional response while reinforcing that Muse is dead and never coming back. Much like Frank Castle's wife and kids. I'm a dead man. Heather then heads to the courthouse where she runs into Kirsten McDuffy, the only black person with an Irish last name that I've ever seen. They briefly talk about Matt and his nature as a lying McLiarpants, but Heather still defends him, knowing that despite his deception, he still has a good heart. But regardless of Kirsten's love for Matt's inner goodness, I am not too sure their business partnership is going to survive all of this the day that she finds out that he's been alive and hiding so much from her this entire time. But maybe she'll understand to some degree because she was there the night that Matt's former partner, Foggy Nelson, was absolutely pranked by Bullseye. And by pranked, I mean assassinated with supernatural precision. Tomato, tomato.
More like tomato cow.
Heather tries to justify her work for Fisk, but Kirsten reminds her that Matt likely disappeared because of the mayor's own actions, while trying to convince her to defect from the Fisk empire entirely because of how she's contributing to the farce that is the vigilante trials. We see Heather's face express a bit of guilt before we transition to the East River as the camera pans over the cargo salvage operation. And during this pan, we can see that one of the yellow shipping containers has the letters XGH on it, modeled after the logo for the real-life Mediterranean Shipping Company. And while I'm not exactly sure what these letters could mean, if I had to guess, I would guess that these letters could be pointing to the Industrial Garment and Handling Organization, also known as IGH, the same secretive organization of scientists and geneticists responsible for saving Jessica Jones's life and giving her as superpowers, while simultaneously operating under the guise of a garment and handling company. But if this logo is not a nod towards IGH, then maybe it could be a nod towards MCU mutant growth hormone, or MGH, with the X in the logo meant to point to the X gene, or maybe even crossing strands of DNA. In the Marvel Comics, MGH is a biochemical substance harvested from mutants and other genetically altered beings that grants ordinary people temporary superpowers by temporarily altering their genetic code. And if you've already got superpowers, MGH has the ability to boost the effects of those powers as well. It's some highly addictive and dangerous black market shit, man. And it's a drug that many have been waiting to enter the MCU ever since the character Elijah Bradley was introduced in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, as his comic book counterpart was very much addicted to using MGH in order to pretend that he was a proper super soldier like his grandfather Isaiah Bradley. So maybe this could be a tease for the existence of this stuff in the MCU. And hell, maybe the Power Broker is even working with Val to smuggle that stuff into the country through the Red Hook port. Because the ending of Falcon and the Winter Soldier featuring Sharon Carter having a mysterious phone call has never been actually resolved. Maybe she was talking to Val, Who knows? We're just using our imagination and theorizing over here. But yeah, at the very top of the Red Hook facility building itself is a symbol of an actual red hook, which is quite fitting. And being escorted into that facility by Cole North is Kirsten McDuffy, with a blindfolded Kirsten apparently taking note of all the sounds that she hears on her way to Jack Duquesne's interrogation cell, notes that Daredevil would use later on to infiltrate the facility. And while talking with his lawyer Kirsten, Jack compares the vigilante trials to the Reign of Terror from the French Revolution, a violent phase of the revolution where the radical leaders in the National Convention created special courts and laws that allowed for quick arrests and executions of anyone seen as a threat to the growing New Republic. And this included nobles, moderates, and even some of their own fellow revolutionaries. And because of this, thousands would actually die by guillotine or other means as the government fought to reshape their society through strict rules and anti-religious measures. This is why Swordsman says the words "les guillotines sur la place de la Nation," which translates to the guillotines at the Place de la Nation, with that location being the major public square in eastern Paris, France, that features a large central monument dedicated to the French Republic. And it's there that thousands of people would lose their heads to the guillotines during this reign of terror, and Swordsman fears that something similar is about to happen to his French ass. But yeah, back at the Punisher hideout, Karen begins acting like Frank by using his wall for herself, printing out pictures of people that she wants to keep track of, like Fisk, Vanessa, Daniel Blake, Buck Cashman, Powell, and even Frank Castle. And speaking of Frank, when Karen mentions that she wishes Frank was here to help them out, Matt immediately objects because of how extreme his methods tend to be. Later on in the episode, we would see Karen actually embrace the Punisher's no-nonsense ideology when she absolutely eliminates an AVTF member during the Red Hook shootout. Her attempt to fight fire with the Fisk Empire after Vanessa had Foggy murdered in cold blood. Over at City Hall, New York Governor Marge McCaffrey, played by actress Lily Taylor, confronts Mayor Fisk with a copy of the March 6, 1855 Red Hook Charter sent to her by Karen Page anonymously. And since the charter notes that only the governor can revoke Red Hook status as a free port, the governor threatens to do just that if Fisk continues to refuse any oversight on his sketchy operations. Over at the corner office of Deputy Mayor Daniel Blake, Daniel eats himself some mystery meat at his desk when he is visited by Buck Cashman. We can see that Daniel has decorated his office a little bit more since we last saw it, as he now has a Yankees baseball mitt on his windowsill, as well as a map of Staten Island on his wall. And we can also see that he has a few of the Fisk administration's propaganda posters around the office as well, like this one with a fist on it that says "Smash the Vigilante Menace," and this poster that has the words "See Someone Say Something," the same poster that we saw on a vending machine in a previous episode when District Attorney Cockburg is on the phone with Heather Glenn. During their conversation, we learn that Buck once served in the British Special Air Service as well as Special Ops, which is quite interesting. I do wonder about his past as a Special Ops agent because I feel like there was a chance that he may have worked alongside Olivia Colman's Sonia Fallsworth over at MI6, but that's neither here nor there. But I definitely feel like the two of them know each other at the very least. Daniel then tells Buck that he intends to get the lieutenant governor sauced so that he can get more intel on the squeaky clean governor, before Buck reminds him that he needs to lock the hell in and find this masked City Without Fear YouTuber, or else the mayor is gonna shove his arm up Daniel's ass and use him as a boxing glove for his big fight against Matterhorn. And speaking of that man of mystery, right after their conversation, we get another City Without Fear YouTube video featuring BB Urich in a Fisk mask. We are shown the same phone footage of Swordsman fighting in a park that we are shown last season before we hear fake Fisk call Swordsman a bargain basement Zorro, referencing the iconic masked hero in black. And as fake Fist flashes footage of Vigilante's Swordsman, Daredevil, and Hector Ayala's White Tiger, we can see that BB somehow got herself footage of Daredevil's fight with Muse from outside Heather Glenn's apartment window, which is wild. The people in New York City really be nosy, I guess. Then towards the end, the fake Mayor Kingpin says that his friendly neighborhood task force is there to protect the people of New York City, with the term friendly neighborhood obviously alluding to Marvel's friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Then we are brought to the day of New York's first vigilante trial. As Chief Justice Waters walks up to her chair, she looks at the words "Truth is great and shall prevail" on the wall, before giving a big sigh, because she knows damn well that the truth does not really matter anymore now that Fisk has so much sway over the justice system. This quote originates from an 1877 short poem by the English poet Coventry Patmore called Magna es Veritas, expressing the idea that truth will ultimately triumph even if nobody actively supports it at the time. Then, when judges Grime and Luna take a seat next to her, the trial begins. A trial that is being covered by news outlets like the New York Times via their Instagram page, as well as Spectrum News, which we see Matt and Karen watching on their laptop. On the phone of a guy on the street watching the New York Times feed, we can see that the time on his phone is 12:15 p.m., but the clock in the court doesn't say that at all, instead reading what looks like to be 8:25 a.m. So this guy must be watching a clip from the trial hours later instead of an actual live stream. And as Matt and Karen talk to each other while watching the trial, they say the phrase, "Hearts and minds win the war." A quote that means that to truly win a conflict against an enemy who hides among regular people, you must win the trust, affection, and loyalty of the local population rather than relying only on force. It's a phrase that first gained wide use when British leader Gerald Templer applied it during the Malayan emergency in the 1950s, though similar ideas have appeared earlier in the past. Unfortunately, since McDuffy was set up to fail, swordsmen would ultimately be found guilty, causing everybody at the Fisk camp to rejoice at their successful launch of their Salem witch trials. Later that night, we see Vanessa Fisk at Gracie Mansion laying on the ground as the sound of birds chirping plays in the background, reflecting how Vanessa Fisk secretly longs to leave the pressures of New York City entirely with Wilson to start a new life of luxury somewhere nice. She then heads to the dinner that she's hosting for the governor and her people, where she attempts to set Heather Glenn up with Buck Cashman by having them sit together. And while the two of them chat about the guests at the party, Buckman compares his colleague Sheila Rivera to the villainous Iago from Shakespeare's Othello, possibly foreshadowing Sheila backstabbing Fisk in the future, and then taking the spot of the mayor for herself, much like we sort of see implied in the Spider-Man Brand New Day trailer when she hands Spider-Man the key to the city. Soon after, the mayor attempts to give a toast before the governor swoops in and takes the honor for herself as a power move. A power move that fills Fisk with rage as the camera focuses in on the knife in his hand. Bro wants that governor gone for show. After this, we are brought to a local bar where Kirsten is drinking away her sorrows about her big loss of the day before Karen bumps into her and leaves her a message to go to her office, where Kirsten meets Daredevil for the first time. And after telling him everything about her one trip to Red Hook, Daredevil uses her sensory information to locate all the caged prisoners and set them free, including Swordsman and Angela's aunt Soledad. And after triggering an alarm, Daredevil and Swordsman then use Daredevil's billy clubs to team up and take the armed AVTF down with relative ease. And my God, did Marvel cook during this action sequence, man. I was literally clapping. I was literally just hype as hell watching this because I was waiting for Swordsman to get a really good scene in the MCU, and he finally has it. And I really like how they included glowing red alarm lights in the background of their fight to accompany Daredevil's red theme. Just as much as I love how Daredevil's black suit appears to be bleeding red more and more over time as he sustains more battle damage during his war with Fisk. It's almost like we're slowly watching Daredevil's era of living in the shadows crumbling away more and more before he can proudly wear his old Daredevil red suit again after taking down Fisk and restoring vigilante rights. After this amazing fight sequence, Karen Page, who is waiting outside, runs into Angela Del Toro, now the newest avatar of the White Tiger God, endowed with the cosmic energy from the White Tiger amulet. And using her powers, Angela manages to steal the guns and comms of a few AVTF agents before helping Karen jack one of their armored trucks to transport all of the prisoners. The AVTF, not wanting any witnesses, begin firing on everybody, eventually leading Karen Gage to blast back, killing one of the agents in the process, an action that I feel will lead to some hardcore consequences for her down the line. Because like I said before, even though these men were clearly working for a fascist and corrupt mayor, like we saw at the beginning of the episode, a lot of these AVTF agents are just normal police officers who have been misled into joining this new branch of law enforcement, and were likely intimidated and bullied by people like Powell into falling in line. So if there were security cameras rolling during the shootout, and one of those cameras caught Karen Page eliminating a police officer, then there's a chance that we might just just see her at the vigilante trials being represented by the offices of McDuffy and McDuffy. And of course, judging purely by the way that Matt looked at Karen after she sent that man straight to the pearly gates, Matt is for sure going to chew Karen out for taking a life. And Karen will undoubtedly attempt to justify her actions by trying to remind Matthew that the two of them are at war with a slowly growing evil fascist empire, and that sometimes they're going to have to get their hands dirty in order to restore freedom for all. And there's a very real possibility that Karen's slow descent into becoming more and more like Frank Castle could end up causing both Matt and Karen to break up, leaving the door open for Frank Castle to swoop in and see if he can get something started with Karen. Because much like we saw last season, there are crazy high levels of sexual tension between the two of them. Tension that Matt could even detect with his heightened senses. But anyways, as Daredevil's armored convoy escapes, Powell attempts to pursue, but realizes that there's a hole in his tires cut in the shape of a tiger scratch, courtesy of Angela Del Toro using her uncle's old knife that she keeps in a sheath with her uncle's initials on it. And of course, the episode ends with Wilson Fisk getting word about the prison break, but not minding all that much about it, because he straight up blows up the salvage workers on the Northern Star, fully intending to frame the blast on vigilantes Daredevil, Swordsman, and Karen Page, elevating their status to full-blown terrorists, which could mean that federal government entities like Val CIA could very well get involved. But regardless, by turning up the heat on these salvage workers, Fisk is also turning up the heat on Team Daredevil. And I cannot wait to see how our heroes react to all of this in the episodes to come. What's good, my Daredevils? It's me, MT, and welcome back to the Heavy Spoiler Show, y'all. And bro, Episode 4 of Daredevil Born Again Season 2 was insane. Not only did Blue Benny go to Denny's and murder many after his milkshake brought all the boys to the yard, but that crazy bastard would do it again and eliminate yet another major character from the Daredevil franchise. So we're going to talk about that and all of the hidden details and references in this episode, so let's just get into this dang thing. Episode 4 of this season of Daredevil Born Again is titled Gloves Off, and boy are the gloves off now after the mayor's big fight night would end with the loss of his beloved wife at the hands of an enhanced costume freak. I mean, I don't have to remind you guys what happened to that one guy who embarrassed Kingpin in front of Vanessa during the Netflix days. Bro turned that man's head into a sloppy Joe between two slices of automobile. So with the loss of the person that he loved the most, any and all emotional restraint that we have seen the mayor have over the course of Born Again is about to be tossed into the East River, because now things have become deeply personal. I mean, not that everything happening in the Born Again series hasn't been deeply personal to the Kingpin already. I mean, the whole Safer Streets initiative was Kingpin's way of getting revenge against enhanced people like Echo, who not only shot the Kingpin in the eyeball, but also got him absolutely shook following her infiltration into the deepest, most traumatic part of his memories, as well as his nemesis Daredevil, who dismantled the Kingpin's old illegal operations through his incessant meddling. However, even after all of that happened, Kingpin was still able to rein in his inner rage and compose himself enough to make a new kind of empire for himself. But now that his boo thing is gone, all bets are off, man, and we are about to see a side of Kingpin that we have never seen before over the course of this second half of the season. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The episode begins with a blue-tinted Marvel Studios logo, foreshadowing Bullseye's immense influence over the episode's events to come. We are then given another piece of foreshadowing through Billy Joel's New York State of Mind track that plays in the background when we are brought to breakfast at Benny's, as it would be Vanessa Fisk who would adopt a New York State of mind when a glass piece of New York finds itself lodged within the side of her head. But yeah, as pinpoint precision Poindexter heats up a pan, he plops an egg into the center of a bullseye that he made out of cooking oil. And we can even roughly make out the shape of a bullseye in the scorch marks on some of Bullseye's other cooking pans hanging up on the kitchen wall. And as he gets ready for a new day, we can see more signs of Benjamin's obsessive compulsive disorder when we see him make his bed with almost militant care, a habit that he undoubtedly picked up during his time as a US Army soldier. And soon after this, we see Benjamin bring a fried egg to Mr. Miyagi, his neighbor Mrs. Smithers' cat, named after the great Mr. Miyagi from the Karate Kid films. But while Mr. Miyagi definitely kicked ass in those movies, our merch options over at heavyspoilers.shop kick even more ass than Miyagi ever could. In a few days, you could have our new Fearless t-shirt inspired by Daredevil Born Again. Or you could barrel roll your ass into some style with our new Squadron shirts inspired by Star Fox and the Super Mario Galaxy movie. But if you're a fan of Invincible on Amazon, then our new Worthy Opponent Conqueror and Eco Dino shirts will look swell on your body. You can find all of that and so much more over at the Heavy Spoilers merch store, so be sure to stop on by today. After this, Benjamin heads straight to Bel Air Diner, a real diner that resides at 31 to 91 21st Street, Astoria, New York. However, after Benjamin orders his delicious milkshake, he would mistakenly say that Bel Air Diner resides at 43rd and 10th Streets while phoning the AVTF, claiming that the Punisher was there hurting people, which isn't exactly true in real life, but might be true in the MCU. Like, the street names might be different. I don't know. But like I said before, soon Bullseye's milkshake would bring all the AVTF boys to the yard. A trap set by Bullseye in order to eliminate as many AVTF agents as possible in the most badass way possible. And something that I found the most interesting about Bullseye's massacre is how he reassures one of the customers that he's one of the good guys towards the end, as it shows that he truly believes that he's on the road to becoming a heroic vigilante outright like Daredevil is, while on his personal mission to wipe out the Fisk family. It'd be really interesting if Marvel Studios is setting Benjamin up to be part of the new Avengers down the line. Like, I can easily see Val recruiting Bullseye to be her like secret spy on the team to make sure that everybody's acting in line. I can for sure see Val trying to manipulate him at the very least, much like she manipulated Sentry. Bullseye then draws a target and ketchup on the doors of the diner before the intro credits hit. But after that intro, we get another video from BB Urich as the masked YouTube user City Without Fear, attempting to expose the mayor's cover-up for the massive explosion of the Northern Star last episode, as well as Fisk's intentions to use the money raised for his big fight against Matterhorn Melendez on his many illegal activities. And the music that plays over the course of most of this video is actually Quest for the Best by David Riley, the same track that was used for the Krusty Krab training video episode from season 3 of SpongeBob SquarePants.
The Krusty Krab today.
After this, we are brought to Team Daredevil's safe house, where all the escaped prisoners from Red Hook are all hiding out. We see Angelo Del Toro's aunt Soledad record a video detailing the inhumane conditions that she faced as a prisoner of Red Hook, before we see Daredevil say goodbye to his new homie Jack Duquesne, aka Swordsman. And as they part, Jack makes sure Daredevil knows that he is now a symbol of hope for all of New York, and that those new double D's on his chest are now actually the new Kryptonian word for hope now, like some sort of Man of Steel 2013.
It's not an S. On my world, it means hope.
What the hell are you talking about?
Jack also notes that he spent a whopping 6 months wearing the same clothes that he was arrested in, which is crazy, and definitely going to lead to a major payday for Jack when he sues the pants out of New York City whenever Fisk is finally taken down. And shortly after this, Angela Del Toro volunteers to deliver some important intel to BB Urich on behalf of Karen Page, right before the group are startled by the sudden arrival of Christophe Sava, the first mate of the Northern Star ship of illegal weapons that the Fisk administration wants to put into the ground. And right before Matt answers the door, we can actually see an upside-down news article on the door on the right that has the headline, Archaeological Discoveries Unearth Ancient Mysteries, near a picture of what appears to be archaeologists analyzing some recently discovered bones of some sort. And if it's to be assumed that this news article came out relatively recently, then this very much makes sense to me, especially considering where we are now at in the MCU. I mean, the world did recently discover that a giant celestial baby has been growing beneath them all since the dawn of man, before being hit with the additional curveballs of there being both vibranium and blue fish people living in the depths of the ocean. And this isn't even mentioning how we learned how New York City sits on a massive treasure trove of cosmically empowered dragon bones in Netflix's Defenders series. Dragon bones that the clandestine organization of evil ninjas known as the Hand used to create a resurrection elixir that granted their leaders enhanced abilities and a prolonged life. So all the eyes of the MCU are very much fixated on the mysteries that lie within the very Earth itself, mostly because of the potential of some of those mysteries to be turned into weapons of some kind. But yeah, this all being said, I feel like this newspaper article could be a hint towards the reemergence of these dragon bones in the MCU, possibly in preparation for the events of Spider-Man Brand New Day. I recently made a theory video on how I believe the Hands Resurrection Elixir might be what triggers Spider-Man's sudden mutation in the upcoming Spider-Man film that you guys can check out on this channel. Marvel putting extra emphasis on dragons makes sense for this phase of the MCU as well because of the relatively recent debut of two major swords in the MCU through the 2021 Eternals film, the Ebony Blade as well as Excalibur. Both the Black Knight and King Arthur have faced dragons long ago in Earth's past in the Marvel comics, and with the Black Knight sure to show up in the MCU sometime soon after Secret Wars, we are bound to learn more about the dragons of Earth very soon. And this isn't even mentioning the inevitable follow-ups to dragon-heavy narratives like Shang-Chi and Netflix's Iron Fist that are sure to come relatively soon too. But anyways, moving on, Christophe tells the group that he wishes to help them after a good number of them were captured because of him. And with Christophe able to connect Wilson Fisk to the illegal shipments, Karen and Matt decide that the best course of action would be to get Christophe to confess everything he knows on camera in front of a lawyer that they can trust, Kirsten McDuffy. But before Karen goes out to meet up with Kirsten, Matt makes sure to tell Karen that he loves her, which is super sweet, but incredibly alarming at the same time, because if you've read comic books long enough, you know damn well that heroes like Daredevil are cursed to never be in a happy relationship for long. I mean, look at Spider-Man. As soon as MJ said I love you to Peter, she got her memories yoinked away by Dr. Magic Broken Fingers. So now that the big L word is in the mix, my concern for the future of their relationship is sky high. But anyways, over at the offices of McDuffy and McDuffy, things go from zero to turbo fascism real quick when the anti-vigilante task force tears shit up looking for a recently freed feisty Frenchman, symbolically breaking the scales off of a figure of Lady Justice in the process, as there is now no equality and fairness under this new administration. And not long after those law offices close for the day, Karen stops by and helps Kirsten clean up. Kirsten attempts to ask Karen where her partner Matt is, but all Karen can do is assure her that he's safe. And for some reason, that alone is enough for Kirsten to volunteer her services to interview Christophe Sava on camera. And after the two women capture everything Christophe knows, Kirsten hands him over to US Marshals, which is a big ass mistake because she did not know that they were all corrupt agents working for Fisk that would just hand Christophe over to Buck Cashman to be executed. Pew pew. Now you're dead. But hey, speaking of cash money Cashman, we see that British man of mystery flex his skills as a marksman hardcore when he shoots down two of Mr. Charles's bodyguards when Mr. Charles tries to intimidate the mayor into getting the government's shipments of weapons delivered to the African nation of Guinea-Bissau like they agreed. Because the clock's a ticking and countries aren't going to destabilize themselves. And this very much falls in line with what Mr. Charles actor Matthew Lillard has said about his character in the past, claiming Mr. Charles to be a kingmaker that the CIA uses to topple and raise regimes throughout the world. And this detail is extremely important in my opinion because it seems to point towards the CIA's direct involvement in the destabilization efforts of other countries, something that we saw hinted at in Black Panther Wakanda Forever.
Queen Ramonda won't sell us any vibranium. And now they abducted a young woman who built the machine. The president wants to take offensive action against Wakanda.
What type of offensive action?
Destabilization.
You ever thought for a second what they could be doing? Ever thought what we would be doing if the US was the only country in the world with vibranium?
Oh, I actually dream about that.
What the CIA hopes to achieve by stoking chaos in Guinea-Bissau is anyone's guess, but considering how much Contessa Val dreams about acquiring as much vibranium as possible for America, maybe the CIA is causing chaos on the continent as part of an overall plot to eventually destabilize Wakanda. Who knows? Guinea-Bissau is in West Africa, a little bit of ways away from Wakanda, but it still could be in play. Who knows? But part of me does wonder whether or not any of these weapons were intended to fall into the hands of a Marvel villain teased a few years back in the 2022 Moon Knight TV show, specifically Raoul Bushman. In episodes 4 and 5 of Moon Knight, we learn how Raoul Bushman was Mark Spector's former commanding officer in the United States Marines before the two of them worked together as mercenaries for hire. And while on a mission to raid the tomb of Khonshu in Africa, Bushman's crazy ass would fatally blast Mark after he tried to stop Bushman from murdering innocents, forcing Mark to have to become Khonshu's superpowered avatar to survive.
Turns out going AWOL in a fugue state gets you discharged from the military. Didn't have a ton of options after that, so I went work for hire for my old CO, Bushman. The job was to raid an Egyptian tomb. Bushman changed the plan, called for no witnesses, and I couldn't live with that.
So, if Bushman is still alive in the MCU, then there is still a chance that that psychopath could still be roaming throughout Africa, raining death and chaos in the name of the highest bidder, and that Mr. Charles could be funding all of that chaos on behalf of the CIA. But speaking of Mr. Charles, that man isn't the first clandestine country destabilizer that we have seen in the MCU. Mitchell Carson, who was introduced in the first Ant-Man movie as one of Hydra's representatives interested in acquiring Darren Cross's shrinking serum, also had a bit of a history of doing the same back in his day.
This isn't the first time these guys have tried to get their hands on game-changing weaponry. That's Mitchell Carson, ex-head of defense at S.H.I.E.L.D., presently in the business of toppling governments.
So part of me is wondering whether or not Mr. Charles has any extensive history with Mitchell Carson in the king toppling business. Meanwhile, Vanessa has a meeting with New York Governor Marge McCaffrey, a meeting that Fisk set up in order to keep her far away from his big fight at Fogwell Gym, as he means to use that fight to lure both Daredevil and Bullseye directly to him, as Fogwell Gym was the same gym that Matt Murdock's dad, Badland Jack Murdoch, frequently trained and fought at before he was killed. Inside the governor's office, we can see a series of plaques and awards. The award on the left is a leadership award thanking the governor for her loyal service and dedication to the Albany business community. In the center, we can see a key to the city of Buffalo presented to the governor for supporting that community. And the rightmost award is another leadership award presented to her for being an inspiration to the youths of New York. Also in her office is a photo of her on the front page of Albany magazine, accompanied by text that reads, "The Power of Progress, Governor Marge McCaffrey on leading New York into tomorrow." And of course, front and center in her office is the seal for the state of New York, a seal that features the word Excelsior on a banner, one of Marvel legend Stan Lee's favorite words.
Excelsior!
And during their conversation, the governor tells Vanessa straight up that she does not trust her husband, but she does trust her and her incredible ability to get stuff done. The governor also goes on to compare the mayor to a white bull and wonders if Vanessa is his Europa. In Greek mythology, Zeus desired a beautiful princess named Europa and decided that the best way to win her over without revealing his identity was to change into the form of a gentle and attractive white bull. Europa would then climb onto this bull out of curiosity, and the bull would carry her swiftly across the ocean waves to the island of Crete, before revealing that he was actually Zeus the whole time and taking her as his lover. Weird shit. But anyways, due to her trust in Vanessa, the governor appears to co-sign the Fisk family's vision for New York. Meanwhile, Matt, dressed in AVTF gear, clears the Bel Air diner crime scene of any AVTF agents to do some detective work on his own, discovering the coin that Bullseye left behind. This would then lead him to Clinton Church, where we saw Bullseye confront that priest in training in episode 2. And upon entering Clinton Church, memories of Matt's childhood within that church starts flooding his mind, with old Netflix footage featuring a young Skylar Gartner as young Matt Murdock flashing on the screen, messing up the show's entire aspect ratio for a quick second. And after questioning the priest in training, Daredevil manages to use his special ears to track down Bullseye to his apartment near the church before jumping his ass. And it's an assault that Bullseye would be able to sense coming with his own superhuman skills of observation. Like, you can see Bullseye immediately sense something is off about the apartment that he carefully put together using his OCD before he throws ACD at Daredevil like some type of ninja shuriken from Naruto. But as Daredevil gets the upper hand in their fight, Bullseye attempts to calm him down by claiming that he's on Matt's side of the fight against Mayor Fisk. But when Bullseye's nosy neighbor comes to the door, Bullseye slithers on over to Mrs. Smithers and holds her hostage, before telling Daredevil that he intends to kill Fisk at the big boxing match in order to make up for the horrible things that he's done to good people like Foggy Nelson with forks, knives, toothpicks, baseballs, and bullets. And while I am sure part of Matt Murdock wants Fisk off of Tiamat's celestial egg of a planet just as much as Bullseye does, he knows that killing Fisk will just make him a martyr that would inspire others to take up his cause. And when Daredevil tells Ben to calm himself down, he merely responds with the words, "I am calm," showing us that he truly believes that he's nearly at the end of his quest to reclaim his mind that has been shattered by both his own overwhelming emotions and manipulated by the evil Fisk family. Bullseye would then flee the scene by jacking a scooter conveniently in his favorite color before heading to the big event. And outside of Fogwell Gym, BB and Daniel Blake wait to get inside before BB is slipped Karen's intel by one of Angela's sneaky ass friends. The hip hop song At a Disadvantage by Slick Naeem plays in the background as everybody gets settled into that event. And as the announcer presents the two main fighters of the night, he notes that the mayor's weight is 325 pounds, around 125 pounds lighter than comic book Kingpin, who apparently pushes a whole 450. The mayor then proceeds to beat the ever-living bricks out of Matterhorn Melendez, winning the fight with relative ease just as Vanessa Fisk walks into the function. But things would quickly take a turn for the worst when Bullseye shows up to finish what he started, taking down more AVTF members before chucking a glass figure of New York City at Vanessa. Fisk would manage to shatter that object before it could hit her, but unfortunately for Big Willie, he would embarrass himself in front of Vanessa for the last time by accidentally launching a big old shard of glass right into the side of her head, ending her life. Whoops.
Oopsie, whoopsie. You said oopsie, whoopsie?
Back to OK Cupid you go, Humpty Dumpty Hitler. That's what you get for being an asshole. And I know that Aubrey Plaza was roasting his ass when she was escorting his Carmen Sandiego ass wife to hell. The very imagery of Vanessa Fisk dying from a flying piece of glass shattered by Mayor Fisk is extremely poetic in my opinion, because Vanessa Fisk was literally killed by New York City itself, a fate that she very much wanted to avoid by leaving New York City entirely with Wilson Fisk, much like she brought up in episode 2 of the season when Vanessa and Wilson were talking after Vanessa's Bullseye nightmare. The mayor's aggression has shattered New York City and has led to the deaths of countless people. So having his aggression shatter a glass recreation of New York City to lead to the death of the person that he loves most is just pure symbolic karma. Even though Bullseye did throw that object, it was actually Fisk who killed Vanessa, and he has to live with that forever. But I gotta say, man, as soon as Vanessa walked into the function in a white dress, I knew that it was up for her in this scene, because nearly every time we see Vanessa Fisk in public, she's wearing some type of red outfit, sharply contrasting the white suits that her husband frequently wears when the two of them stand side by side. And while I am sure that Vanessa deliberately chose to wear a white dress to symbolically show her devotion to her husband by matching with him, Vanessa switching up her style so suddenly still raised a major red flag for me personally, and I knew that at some point the color red would be introduced onto that dress through Bullseye's actions. And not only that, but I've sort of been waiting for something bad to happen to Vanessa ever since the end of last season, especially when we get this shot of Vanessa and Wilson eating together in front of the mayor's beloved Rabbit in a Snowstorm painting, the same painting that the two of them bonded over when they first met in season 1 episode 3 of Netflix Daredevil. Having Vanessa sit on the same side as the red splotch of blood splattered on the side of the painting felt like some hardcore foreshadowing towards Vanessa's own demise in the season to come. A demise that would actually echo that very same blood-stained Rabbit in a Snowstorm painting, with Vanessa's own blood-stained white dress. And with Daredevil stopping the mayor from blasting Bullseye in the face before saving Bullseye from AVTF gunfire, it seems inevitable that a furious Mayor Fisk will end up telling everyone that the two of them are in cahoots, working together to target innocent people. And the two of them might just have to team up in order to survive, because a tilted Mayor Fisk is gunning for their asses. And I cannot wait to see how things ramp up in the second half of the season. But part of me does very much wonder if this is truly the end for Vanessa Fisk. In the comics, Wilson Fisk would suffer the loss of Vanessa Fisk after she would contract a terminal illness, with her dying in the pages of Daredevil 92 and 93 from 2007. However, the character would briefly be resurrected by the Hand as a weapon to use against Kingpin in the pages of Savage Wolverine number 8 from 2013. So maybe there's a chance that we might see the Hand resurrect Vanessa in order for her to be one of the new leaders of their clan. I mean, she was always wearing the color red, so she would fit right in. But with where we are at in the MCU, I feel like there's also the possibility possibility that we might see Wilson Fisk attempt to do what his Into the Spider-Verse variant did in that movie and try to bring a variant Vanessa from an alternate universe to 616 at some point. I mean, it would be a wild twist for sure, but it's still something that I can see Wilson Fisk pursuing, especially after the Avengers brought everyone Thanos snapped back to life using multiversal travel. So maybe Fisk dedicates the rest of his life to attempting to recreate the Avengers experiments with the quantum realm to bring Vanessa back. I would not put anything past Fisk, really, especially after that man asked how many worlds there were in a recent episode.
How many more worlds do you need to conquer?
How many are there?
But anyways, that is it for this breakdown of episode 4 of Daredevil Born Again Season 2. What's good, my Daredevils? It is me, MT, and welcome back to another Heavy Spoilers breakdown. Today, we are diving into the absolutely phenomenal 5th episode of Daredevil Born Again Season 2, a flashback episode featuring everybody's favorite soon-to-be slain Foggy Nelson. But thankfully, it's an episode that does not waste its much-anticipated return of actor Eldon Henson, as it highlights exactly what made Foggy Nelson such a special part of both Matt Murdock's life as well as the lives of the people of New York as a whole. So I'm going to practice a little bit of mercy of my own by ending this intro so that we can jump right into it. Episode 5 of the season is titled The Grand Design, an appropriate title considering how the episode centers around both the iconic Rabbit in a Snowstorm painting that brought both Wilson Fisk and Vanessa Mariana together, and also the concept of fate and destiny in general. We'll talk about that second part a little bit later and its significance to the MCU's overall multiverse saga narrative. But the episode begins with the sounds of crashing waves as Vanessa Fisk has a dream of walking down the beach hand in hand with her big white wall of a hubby, Wilson, much like she told Big Willie a few episodes ago after her foreboding nightmare about Bullseye. These ocean sounds would of course be featured at the end of the episode as well when Vanessa makes her transition to the afterlife. This tranquil beach vibe is quickly shifted to the harsh reality of Vanessa being in critical condition at the hospital, with a distraught Wilson needing to be held back as the doctors attend to his dying wife. Officer Powell, undoubtedly pissed that Bullseye eliminated even more of his guys after breaking through the AVTF defenses, visits the mayor at the hospital, vowing to find both Bullseye and Daredevil by any means possible. And I love how Powell is presented during this scene in particular, appearing only as a darkened and sometimes blurry silhouette in the background as Wilson continues to focus his attention on Vanessa, not truly acknowledging Powell's presence at all, despite ordering Powell to deliver both Matt Murdock and Benjamin Poindexter to him alive, undoubtedly so he could punch them in the penis a few times before inserting their collective rectums into their esophaguses. Esophagi? I don't know. The point is, if Fisk gets them, they gonna die. And after some time passes, Fisk then meets up with Dr. Murati, one of the best brain surgeons in the field. Dr. Murati promises the mayor that he'll do everything in his power to save Vanessa, but says that, quote, nothing is certain where the mind meets the soul, with the doctor, of course, referring to the human brain, as that is the physical location where the mind and the soul are thought to reside within human beings. But if your brain is working correctly, then it should love all of our dope-ass merch options over at the Heavy Spoilers merch store. We just dropped our brand new Deadly Aim t-shirt inspired by Bullseye of Daredevil Born Again. But if you're on Team Daredevil, that's okay. We've also got you covered with our new Fearless t-shirt inspired by the Man Without Fear himself. We've got all that and so much more over at the Heavy Spoilers merch store. So stop by heavyspoilers.shop today to get you some. But let's switch things on over to Daredevil and Bullseye for a bit, because not long after the start of the episode, we catch up with those two lovebirds as they hold each other tightly while running from the police. The two of them find their way to the back of a random kitchen where Matt attempts to save Bullseye from bleeding out after being shot by Vanessa Fisk at Fogwell Gym. And I love how the cooks immediately start giving Daredevil anything that he needs before helping the two of them escape, because we finally get a true look at just how much the city itself truly values Daredevil as the very symbol of hope that swordsman Jack Duquesne told Matt that he was in episode 4.
You're not a hero. You're a symbol now. Hope for an entire city.
And after sustaining some battle damage after his brush with Bullseye in the AVTF, we can see even more red peeking through Daredevil's black Shadowland-inspired suit. And like I brought up before in a previous breakdown, this imagery of the black on Daredevil's suit slowly crumbling away over time is meant to reflect this overall theme of rebirth and being born again that the series is all about. Because much like how a butterfly emerges from a cocoon transformed and changed, Daredevil himself will become reborn after overcoming New York's darkest days without losing himself to his own darkness, much like we see visualized in the Daredevil intro animation when we see a statue of Daredevil being formed from the rubble of a crumbled New York. And a big reason why Matt hasn't completely lost himself is because of his dead homie, Foggy Nelson, whose companionship would end up becoming a living reminder for Matt to embody the core tenet of his own religious faith: mercy. And it would be this very merciful nature within Daredevil that would cause a leaking Bullseye deep confusion and frustration, especially after Matt casually tossed his Poindexter ass off of a roof the moment Benny sniped the Nelson out of Nelson and Murdoch last season. And as Matt carries Bullseye through some underground tunnels, Benjamin tries to convince him that his highly unlikely survival after falling from such a ridiculous height meant that he had some type of divine mission to balance the scales, as part of some grand design crafted by some cosmic artist weaving the threads of fate.
Maybe that's the grand design. You're getting it.
And this idea of a grand design comes up again later on in the episode when Vanessa tells Fisk that they were destined to be together because of this grand design.
Not luck at all. It was the grand design.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
And of course, through Marvel projects like the Loki series and Sony's Spider-Verse films, we, the audience, know that both Bullseye and Vanessa are right. There has been a grand design in the MCU, a cosmic design heavily influenced by the emotion-fueled choices of every single living being in the cosmos. And it's those very emotional choices that characters like Vanessa, Wilson, Foggy, and Matthew made 12 years ago that are the focus of this particular episode, as we learn exactly how these emotional connections act as the first dominoes that would pave the path of their futures. In the case of Vanessa, when we enter her memories surrounding the circumstances that caused her to meet Wilson Fisk 12 years ago, we see how Vanessa's deep emotional attachment to the seemingly insignificant all-white rabbit in a snowstorm painting would lead her to attempt to convince one of her colleagues at the Scene Contempo art gallery that the painting will sell. And not only is she confident that the painting will sell, but it'll also sell significantly above the asking price, specifically when someone sees the painting and has their own unique emotional reaction to it, an emotional reaction that makes them reflect or confront the reality of their own inner emptiness. And that, of course, is exactly what happens when Vanessa and Fisk meet at the very end of episode 3 of Netflix Daredevil season 1. She's immediately drawn to Fisk because of how locked in he was while staring at the rather simple looking piece of art. And during that scene, Vanessa tells Wilson that it's not about the artist's name or the skill required, not about the art itself. All that matters is, how does it make you feel? To which Wilson replies that the painting makes him feel alone. And in last episode's breakdown, I did note how the bloody rabbit in a snowstorm painting that we see Vanessa Fisk eating right next to at the end of the last season was meant to foreshadow Vanessa Fisk's bloody fate this season, specifically through Vanessa's bloodied white dress. So much like how the rabbit in a snowstorm painting made Wilson feel alone when they first met, Vanessa herself would end up making Wilson feel the same way during their final meeting, as he watches her die at the end of this episode, causing Vanessa to end up becoming a living representation of that very same art piece. A living representation that would ironically make Wilson Fisk feel even more alone than he's ever been before. Vanessa's deep emphasis on emotion in both of these episodes is super important to this idea of the grand design. And I believe that these themes were specifically underscored here in this episode in order to symbolically tie into Marvel Studios' overall multiverse saga, a saga that's due to come to a close very soon with the next two Avengers films, Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars. Because much like we learned in the season 1 finale of the Loki series, the fates of every soul in the entire 616 timeline were being carefully manipulated and molded by a madman of a grand designer seated at the end of time, the victorious Kang variant known as He Who Remains. He Who Remains and the TVA spent eons perfecting the grand design of the 616 timeline, making sure that the emotions of everybody that existed in that timeline would lead them down a specific path, immediately arresting anybody whose hearts and minds led them to make a choice that did not align with Kang's cosmic plan, and erasing the changed universe they accidentally created with their emotional choices. And I mean, hell, we see this emotional manipulation best exemplified through the Loki variant Sylvie, a girl that He Who Remains manipulated into hating him so much that she would expose his internal organs to the outside world with her sword, causing the multiverse to start branching wildly. The grand designer He Who Remains made sure that both Vanessa and Wilson would meet in order for the two of them to influence the very future of New York City, as well as the entire world at large through their powerful union. Because you gotta remember, the mutant saga is on the way, and He Who Remains knew that. So, in order to further prime 616 Earth for max superhuman xenophobia, massive influential figures like the Fisk family were needed in order to promote anti-superhuman propaganda and advance legislation aimed at hunting down vigilantes, paving the way for more extreme measures in the future, like the inevitable mutant hunting sentinel program. So yeah, that all being said, because Vanessa let her heart be her guide, she would make the unpopular decision to hang up the painting that would bring her and Wilson together, with Wilson having discovered the Scene Contempo art gallery at the suggestion of his old pal James Wesley, played once again by actor Toby Leonard Moore. Poor Wesley was of course tragically slain by psycho serial killer Karen Page in episode 11 of Netflix Daredevil season 1. I mean, yeah, sure, he did kidnap her and threaten to eliminate everybody that she cares about if she didn't cave to his demands, but come on, man, Wesley had a family. I mean, we don't know much about that family, admittedly, but we did know that he had a big, bald, evil egg of a boyfriend who was waiting for Wesley to tuck him into bed that night. Also, I'm pretty sure Wesley's optometrist was equally devastated at his demise, but that's neither here nor there. And purchasing art at Vanessa's gallery, of course, allows Wilson and Wesley to hide all of the dirty money they've made through their new alliance with Russian mafia leaders Vladimir and Anatoly Ronskahov. But there are matters that art galleries cannot deal with, like silencing street thug Lionel Ray McCoy, who Wesley refers to as the Lion after receiving a call about McCoy getting off on his litany of charges, thanks to a legal loophole from a clerical error discovered by young avocados at law Foggy Nelson and Matthew Murdoch. But luckily for Fisk, Wesley is a problem solver who knows some pretty handy people. People like Buck Cash Money Cashman, who Wesley apparently has known since before the days he became a high-level member of a criminal enterprise. Wesley hands him an envelope with McCoy's information, which tells us that McCoy was born on April 13th, 1977 in New York City, making him around 38 years old around the year 2015. And it also correctly lists his address as 130 and a half West 49th Street, apartment 5E, with a 10019 zip code for Midtown Manhattan. However, when Buck arrives to that address to send Mr. McCoy to the afterlife, he is nowhere to be seen, thanks to Lionel McCoy's childhood friend Foggy Nelson, who gives him all the money that both he and Matt saved up to start their own law firm, without consulting Matt Murdock at all. And I don't blame Foggy, because young Matt had next to no sympathy for McCoy at all, especially after seeing how terribly McCoy has bullied Foggy for as long as the two of them have known each other. Not only that, but McCoy not accepting a plea deal screwed Matt and Foggy hardcore, leading their boss Mr. Levine to punish them to work late into the night. But it would be this very punishment that would end up leading Foggy to discover the clerical error that would ultimately earn McCoy his freedom, but not before discovering that his homie Matt has a weird thing for feet, which is an absolutely wild fact to know about a superhero. And I bet that man was ready to go as soon as he super sniffed out She-Hulk's massive, green, sweaty, gamma-radiated size 15 feet. But hey, no judgment.
I'm quietly judging you.
But anyways, as the two of them debate over whether or not McCoy even deserves to be set free, we can notice a number of interesting details about their office. Firstly, we can see one of the boxes in their office has the name Lear, Mary written on it, with Mary Lear actually being the name of one of the set decoration interns on the production. And a little bit later on, we get a shot of this bobblehead of a bearded man wearing a shirt with the words, "We are not an allegory" on it. This bobblehead is actually of Daredevil Born Again showrunner Dario Scardapane. And the quote is actually from an April 2025 interview that he did with Men's Health magazine about the series. Dario would say this phrase, "We are not an allegory," while clarifying that while Daredevil Born Again might echo certain real-world events that may hit close to home to people in America, the series themes of a fascist political power grab is meant to draw from actual history, rather than functioning as a direct parallel or hidden commentary on the politics happening currently in the nation. But hey, if the shoe fits, am I right? Alright. But one of the coolest things about how this office scene was shot is how the set design seems to perfectly split both Matt and Foggy's halves of the office where their desks meet. Even the window view that Matthew Murdoch hilariously has stops at the exact space where their two desks meet. An excellent piece of cinematography that not only shows how divided the two of them were while discussing what to do with McCoy, but also serves to reflect how the two of them appear to embody the two symbolic halves of Lady Justice. During their argument, Matt embodies Lady Justice's sword of swit and righteous punishment, while Foggy embodies Lady Justice's scales, as he seeks true, fair, and impartial deliberation for his buddy McCoy. And that is when Foggy reminds Matt about his own inner compassion, and how sometimes we should give a little mercy to others, even if we feel like they don't deserve it. Because Foggy knows that circumstances aren't always black and white, and that sometimes people get a bad deal and need extra compassion. And that lesson in emotional empathy would end up being one that would help forge Matt Murdock's own future path as a righteous, crime-fighting hero as part of the cosmic grand design. And that very merciful nature would then lead Daredevil to carrying Bullseye all the way to Clinton Church, where Bullseye tells Daredevil how every person on the planet is just attempting to scratch the itch of their own personal emotional compulsions, which is exactly how the emotion-fueled grand design of the MCU works, like I mentioned before. But their conversation would be cut short by the sudden arrival of the AVTF, who almost capture both Daredevil and Bullseye were it not for Daredevil pushing past his own inner selfishness to save his enemy, just like Foggy would have wanted. What a king! Couldn't be me, because I would have let Fisk blow his ass down over at Fogwell Gym.
I believe there's a hero in all of us.
Not. But someone who surprisingly doesn't get his ass blown down by Buck Cashman is, of course, Daniel Blake, whose ass is in major hot water after BB Urick seemingly leaks information about Vanessa's critical condition to real-life Spectrum news reporter Annika Pergament, who we see on the TV screen in the hospital. And due to the incredible acting, writing, editing, and camera work of this episode, we can truly feel Daniel's inner dread as he believes that Buck is about to put one in the back of his head before chopping up his body into little pieces. Like, I was still very much at the edge of my seat, even though I knew damn well that Buck Cashman was just preparing to do away with Christoffy's body, as we just saw him assassinate Christoffy at the end of last episode. But even though Daniel managed to escape death for now, things might not look too good for him and anyone else who pisses Fisk off in the near future. As the episode of course ends with Vanessa succumbing to her injuries after Wilson tells her the story of how they met. The episode ending with Vanessa dreaming of walking down the beach with her husband is not just us watching the dreams of a dying woman, in my opinion, but also us getting a peek into what Vanessa Fisk's afterlife potentially looks like. Because as we learn in the Moon Knight series, what happens after death for beings of the MCU is entirely dependent on what each particular being believes in the most. For Mark Spector, his afterlife was the peaceful field of reeds from Egyptian mythology because of his own belief in Khonshu. For Jane Foster, her experiences with Thor and Asgard, combined with her valor in battle, awarded her the privilege to join the fallen Asgardian heroes at Valhalla. And before Captain Marvel annihilated the Supreme Intelligence, the Kree people believed that they all joined the collective consciousness of the Supreme Intelligence. And because of that belief, the Supreme Intelligence grew more intelligence with every new added mind. And of course, we saw Rocket Raccoon briefly enter his own ideal afterlife of a forever and beautiful sky with his friends in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. So in that same vein, because all Vanessa wanted was to be by the ocean with Wilson, her afterlife is likely just her chilling by the ocean forever, waiting for Wilson to come join her whenever his Humpty Dumpty ass finally falls off of the damn wall. And we saw a similar type of audio cue happen directly after the tragic death of Hector Ayala at the end of last season's 3rd episode, as that episode ended with the sounds of coqui frogs, giving us a look into Hector's own afterlife where he's enjoying the soothing sounds of coqui frogs from Puerto Rico. But as Vanessa waits for her husband in the afterlife, an emotionally tilted Wilson is bound to lose all emotional control entirely and turn to even more drastic measures in order to hunt down the men he believes are responsible for his wife's death. And that blind red-hot rage will inevitably lead him to his own downfall by the end of the season. Because like Bullseye said, we are who we are. The mayor may have been able to keep his inner rage in check in order to play politics, but now that the woman keeping him together is gone, all bets are now off. And we are definitely going to see the Kingpin be unleashed in these last few episodes of this season. And I cannot wait for all that shit, son! What's going on, my Daredevils? It's me, MT, and welcome back to yet another heavy spoilers breakdown, y'all. This time we're going to be breaking down the amazingly hyped 6th episode of the season, an episode that featured the long-awaited showdown between Daredevil and Kingpin, as well as the Resistance and the AVTF. So let's do a quick recap of the episode and talk about all the hidden details and references that you could have missed, shall we? The episode begins with an emotionally distraught and defeated Wilson Fisk next to his lifeless wife Vanessa on her hospital deathbed. Vanessa's surgeon, Dr. Murdoch, who Wilson expected to be the best in his field, attempts to console the mayor with kind words followed by a nice warm hug between bros. However, Dr. Murdoch's body was not ready to get cracked like dry spaghetti after Big Willie No Wife decides to hug him to death in an insanely brutal fashion. Like, bro, imagine busting your ass in medical school to become a brain surgeon only to be murdered by a big sad egg. What an awful way to go. And this display of strength is just another in a long list of ways that we see Wilson Fisk display a superhuman level of strength, which kind of begs the question, is Wilson Fisk's strength completely natural, or is some part of his physiology mutated in some way to make him an enhanced being? I mean, in the comics, Wilson Fisk has never been confirmed to be a mutant or some other cosmically enhanced being at all. Like, bro is literally just 441 pounds of pure muscle with only 9 pounds of fat on his 450 pound ass self. And that was all the result of intense combat training, especially in the art of sumo wrestling. However, despite us having seen MCU Kingpin train his body in his own way, I personally am not convinced that this version of the character has not been enhanced in some fashion. Like, bro literally punched through a brick pillar during his fight with Daredevil later on in the episode. Like, I don't care how strong you are, nobody that hasn't been juiced up in some way is able to do something like that. And there's no precedent of something like that in the MCU outside of Wilson Fisk himself. So I firmly believe that at some point in Kevin Feige's mutant saga, Wilson Fisk's mutated DNA will at least be discussed or hinted at. Like, I would truly love for the future 616 Professor Xavier to look into Wilson's biology at some point to either confirm or deny any influence of the X gene triggering at some point in his youth. But what do you guys think? I'm interested to hear whether or not you believe Fisk is a superhuman or just a peak human of pure muscle like he is in the comics. Sound off in those comments below and let me know. And if you love superhumans, then I think you're going to love our fun superhero inspired merch over at the Heavy Spoilers merch store. And now is the best time too, because we recently dropped our new Deadly Aim t-shirt inspired by Bullseye of Daredevil Born Again. But if you are on Team Daredevil, then we've also got you covered with our new Fearless t-shirt inspired by the man without fear himself. We've got all that and so much more over at the Heavy Spoilers merch store, so stop by heavyspoilers.shop today to get you some. But yeah, after Captain Crunch does his thing, leaving Buck Cashman to clean up his mess yet again, we transition to Vanessa's funeral scene, with everyone appropriately dressed in black except for Mayor Fisk himself, who chooses to continue sporting his traditional white suit that he's known for in the comics. He approaches Vanessa's all-white casket and places a red rose on it, with this combination of colors symbolically representing their union, as Vanessa herself mostly wore red, while Wilson mostly wears white. And we see such imagery, of course, reflected in Wilson's favorite Rabbit in a Snowstorm painting, which sports a splotch of red blood on it. And another piece of cinematography that I loved during this scene happens as Wilson walks to the doors right after this, as we see this chandelier on the ceiling almost form a halo over Fisk's head, a halo that he walks away from as he exits the building. And when I first saw that shot, I instantly viewed it as Wilson Fisk officially walking away from the false halo that he's displayed for the world, and going full ruthless Kingpin mode in his quest for vengeance, regardless of what anyone else thinks. And not even Wilson's mysterious CIA partner, Mr. Charles, is exempt from his violent rebirth, as we can see that Wilson has stolen all of the weapons that he was trafficking for the CIA at Red Hook, completely ignoring Mr. Charles when he calls for an explanation, giving Mr. Charles no other choice but to go directly to New York Governor Marge McCaffrey to seek her help with ending Wilson's regime once and for all, something that she is more than happy to do now that Vanessa, the only woman that she trusted to keep the mayor in line, is now gone. What's interesting about Mr. Charles' interaction with the governor is how they seem to already know each other from past dealings, which makes me wonder whether or not a previous alliance alliance with a kingmaker like Mr. Charles resulted in her going from mayor of New York City to governor of the state of New York. I mean, when the governor first walks in to greet Mr. Charles, we see him drinking some of the Michter's 20-year whiskey that he bought for her, a bottle that typically costs between $1,200 to $5,000 depending on where you buy it from. And the governor, of course, pretty much immediately asks Mr. Charles what he wants from her, implying that she's already helped him and the CIA in the past. So I do wonder how exactly Marge McCaffrey has historically used her powers to help Mr. Charles, and how those decisions helped the CIA shape geopolitics in their favor. But it also sort of begs the question, who does Mr. Charles really work for? I mean, yeah, he seems to work for the CIA over at Langley, but is that specifically where his loyalties lie? I mean, I only ask because of his role as a regime changer / coup facilitator, one that was hoping to ship the massive stash of weapons on the Northern Star over to the African nation of Guinea-Bissau in order to cause chaos over there. And while yes, the United States government is no stranger to stirring the pot in other countries, causing global chaos is also the staple of one of the MCU's most secretive and nefarious organizations out there, Hydra, an organization that was exposed by Captain Steve Rogers in Captain America: The Winter Soldier. In that very same movie, the computer consciousness of Zola reveals to both Steve and Natasha that Hydra's main method of securing power over the countless decades of its existence is specifically through causing as much chaos as possible so that people around the world would be willing to give up their freedoms to governments or organizations in order to keep them safe. And to that end, they have historically used other regime manipulators like Ant-Man 1 villain Mitchell Carson to get it done, much like I brought up in a previous breakdown. And ever since the events of the first Ant-Man movie, Hydra has been working in the shadows because, you know, that's their whole motto. If you circumcise one head, 2 more heads will grow in its place with extra foreskin, or something like that.
If they cut off one head, 2 more shall take its place. Hail Hydra.
And nip the tip. Who's first?
So, if S.H.I.E.L.D. was a head of Hydra that got sliced off by Captain Steve Hercules Rogers, then it's only a matter of time before Hydra returns to the MCU through the infiltration of other influential organizations like the CIA, SWORD, or even Damage Control. So if that's actually the case with the CIA, I genuinely wonder whether or not Mr. Charles knows about Hydra's influence, or if he's just an unknowing pawn like hundreds of other S.H.I.E.L.D. agents were in the past. I don't know. Just a thought. And speaking of Mr. Charles, outside of his work with smuggling weapons on behalf of the CIA, apparently the sketchy-ass Scooby-Doo character of a government agent is also very much interested in enhanced people. People like Daredevil and his old pal, Jessica Jones, who we see finally make her grand return to the MCU after 7 long years, to the great pleasure of actress Kristen Ritter, who has been campaigning hard for her character's resurgence. And during a later rooftop conversation that Jessica has with Matt, it's implied that Mr. Charles managed to convince Jessica Jones's big black booty call of a love interest, Luke Cage, to work alongside him in some way, while Jessica herself decided to give Chuck the old center finger. But what exactly does Mr. Charles and Contessa Val's CIA want with enhanced heroes like Luke and Jessica anyway? I mean, I could definitely see them wanting to use them as superhuman weapons like Val has done with the New Avengers, but at the same time, Val was sort of forced into doing so by the Thunderbolts at the end of their movie. So I'm not too sure if Val's exactly excited at the prospect of making another team of goody two-shoes superheroes that she can't directly control. I believe that it's far more likely that Contessa Val's ultimate goal is to continue her work on developing a brand new super soldier serum with her team of undercover nerds over at the Ox Group, a group that gets a tiny bit of a shout out later on in the episode. And to that end, I believe that they're actually most interested in getting them some of that sweet, sweet mutated DNA that is the source of Jessica, Luke, Matthew, and Iron Fist's incredible powers. But even more so than all of them, I think Mr. Charles is most interested in studying the blood of Jessica and Luke's child, Danielle Cage, who we see abandoning her boring old toys for the fun new beeping toy from the Grenade Fairy. I love the Grenade Fairy.
Fear my whimsy!
Because ever since Danielle Cage was delivered by Dr. Stephen Strange himself in the pages of issue 13 of The Pulse from 2006, the eyes of so many people on Earth 616 have been trained on this little girl. I mean, an absolutely massive crowd of news reporters literally swarmed the outside of Dr. Strange's sanctum while Jessica Jones was giving birth, just so they could get a picture of the baby. However, it would be 12 years later in issues 1 to 4 of 2018's The Hunt for Wolverine Adamantium Agenda that that we would learn how Danielle Cage's DNA was secretly stolen by the mad geneticist and notorious X-Men villain Mr. Sinister, before one of Mr. Sinister's former employees named Declan Fay would steal Danny's DNA from Mr. Sinister to sell that DNA on the black market. Mr. Sinister has historically been very interested in the blood of people born from two superhuman parents, much like he was with the offspring of Scott Summers and Jean Grey in the comics, a plot that was centric to the first season of Marvel's recent X-Men 97 series on Disney+. And while there has been rumors of Mr. Sinister's upcoming influence in the mutant saga to come, I think that there is a chance that Marvel could be paving the way for Mr. Sinister's eventual appearance by establishing how hungry entities in the MCU are to study and unlock the potential of superpowered DNA, like an offspring like Danielle Cage. And the Secret Invasion TV series very much showed just how hungry humanity is by revealing how Nick Fury ordered a team of Skrulls to gather all the superpowered DNA from the scene of the big Endgame battle in order to hide all that dangerous genetic potential from the rest of the world. And we also cannot forget how the She-Hulk series showed how far some entities like Todd Phelps' intelligentsia were willing to go to harvest the potential of She-Hulk's DNA for their own gain. So I can very much see Danielle Cage's narrative evolving to be an extension of those DNA hunting narratives like Secret Invasion and She-Hulk. But another upcoming show that is very likely to show the world's interest in the DNA of superhuman offspring is, of course, Vision Quest, starring the only Avenger whiter than Steve Rogers, White Vision, because after White Vision died, SWORD decided to smear Vision's body in mayonnaise for some reason, because whether it be John Walker or Sentry, the government was trying to make sure they got their superpowered white man by any means necessary. But Vision Quest is of course set to feature the grand return of Tommy Maximoff, after his resurrection into the dying body of Tommy Shepard was teased during the events of Agatha All Along. And the reason why I believe this is because when we are first introduced to a teenage Tommy Shepard in the pages of Young Avengers number 10 from 2006, the Young Avengers break Tommy out of a high-security government prison for superhumans, one that subjected Tommy to endless experiments while simultaneously studying his DNA with the hopes of eventually turning Tommy himself into a living weapon. That being said, with Tommy Maximoff being the child of both Wanda and Vision, I can see the CIA, Val's Ox Group, and even Damage Control being involved in sketchy experiments on Tommy, all in an effort to create the perfect mutated super soldier for the United States, a fitting narrative for the start of the mutant saga. But outside of Danny Cage and Tommy Maximoff, other new characters that could potentially be targeted by these sketchy organizations like the CIA for their genetic potential are, of course, Scar, the son of the Incredible Hulk, and an enhanced alien woman named Kyera, as well as Franklin Richards of the Fantastic Four, whose genetic potential was being marveled at by Robert Downey Jr.'s Dr. Doom at the very end of Fantastic Four First Steps. But at any rate, I personally would not be surprised if getting at Danny Cage's blood is the true goal of all of these agents, as there are multiple realities in the Marvel Comics where Danny Cage has the superpowers of both of her parents, Jessica's super strength as well as her father's superhuman durability. And in many of those realities, she also eventually inherits the mantle of Captain America, so I very much expect for her to inherit the shield sometime after Sam Wilson. I mean, it'll probably be like a decade later, but eventually. And there's also a timeline where Danielle Cage becomes worthy of wielding Mjolnir, becoming the Thor of the Old Man Logan universe, which is super cool. So there are all sorts of exciting possibilities for this brand new MCU character, and she is for sure going to be centric to the mutant saga to come. I definitely feel like she'll end up being confirmed as a mutant outright, even though I don't believe that she has been confirmed to be a mutant in the comics. In the actual comics, Danielle is actually named after Luke Cage's best friend, Danny Rand, aka the Immortal Iron Fist. So I'm willing to guess that this is also the case in the MCU, as I'm sure both Luke Cage and Danny Rand have only gotten tighter since we last saw them together. But before Danny's playtime with a grenade could come to an explosive end, Mama Jones would shove her purple socks into the collective asses of all of the agents before yoinking the grenade out of a curious Danny's hands, with a few notes of Netflix's Jessica Jones theme music playing in the background as she does. Purple is of course the color most associated with Jessica Jones and her series, much like how red is for Daredevil, yellow is for Luke Cage, and green is for Iron Fist. And a big reason for Jessica Jones's purple theme is due to her comic book counterpart's past as a superhero named Jewel, who used to rock a purple wig to match the purple jewel on her hip of her former costume. And a lot of you may remember how the 5th episode of Netflix Jessica Jones Season 1 had a nice little nod to comic book Jessica's former costume.
This is it. This is the one.
Tell me you're kidding.
Superheroes wear costumes.
The only place anyone is wearing that is trick-or-treating or as
part of some kinky role-playing scenario.
Danny Cage herself inherits this purple color theme in her own clothing in the comics, often seen wearing purple shirts and whatnot. Here in this episode, we see Danny wearing purple fairy wings while also playing with a number of purple-themed toys as well. But anyways, as a result of this surprise raid, Jessica shoots Karen a text for Matt to meet up with her on the roof of a Storage Plus building, and a text that actually shows up just in time for Matt, as an enraged Karen gives Matt an earful about how they should not be helping Bullseye heal from his gunshot wounds after he eliminated Foggy Nelson in cold blood. She even references Father Lantom's death in episode 10 of Daredevil season 3, and expresses regret for convincing Matt to not murder Fisk in retaliation. And my god, does Deborah Ann Wall put in an incredible performance in this episode, man. You can truly see how much her anger at Bullseye for what he's done is pushing her to embrace her own inner dark side. And the fact that she was 100% going to blast that man out of the 616 continuity entirely if Matt did not stop her in time is absolutely insane. And yet another sign of Karen's descent into becoming more and more like her buddy, Frank Castle. And she even tells Matt that he needs to grow up and accept that in order to make real change, some people have to be put down. An argument that Frank Castle himself had with Daredevil in Netflix Daredevil season 2 when he had Daredevil tied up on a roof. And I really do feel like by the end of the season, Matt and Karen will no longer be together, and that Karen will end up on her own path. A path that might just briefly lead her into the arms of the Punisher himself, much like I theorized in a previous video. They were definitely showing signs of flirtation in season 1 of Born Again, so I feel like it's only a matter of time until Marvel pulls and develops that particular narrative thread. But yeah, after Matt leaves Karen alone with Bullseye and a loaded gun, the time shifts to 2:15 p.m. when he meets up with Jessica on the roof near Kingpin's new weapon smuggling safe house. And during their conversation, Daredevil senses that Jessica's brush with the government gunman caused her to get injured and fatigued, a new change in Jessica Jones's power set that seems to have been triggered by the birth of Danielle Cage, likely alluding towards Danielle having potentially absorbed a small bit of her mother's power set into her own biology. But despite this minor setback, Jessica is ready to do battle with some baddies with her blind buddy Matt, and the two of them get to work kicking all sorts of AVTF ass. And during this incredible team-up sequence, we get a glimpse of what's in some of these boxes of weapons. When Jessica goes to rip the top of a container to protect herself from gunfire, we can see a gray box behind that container with some Russian writing on it. Writing that points to that gray container holding volume detonating munitions, or most commonly known as thermobaric munitions. These type of weapons work by first spraying a cloud of flammable mist or powder into the air, then igniting it. This creates a powerful, long-lasting pressure wave and intense heat that sucks oxygen out of the surrounding area, making them super deadly in confined spaces like buildings, tunnels, and bunkers, while also making them far more destructive than regular explosives of the same size. And as one AVTF agent is firing at a shielded Jessica, we can see the word Raketenwerfer on a box to the right of the frame, with that word being the German word for rocket launcher. And of course, much like we saw in the trailers for Born Again Season 2, a gray box with the Ox Group logo can be seen to the left of the screen when Jessica bonks an agent with her makeshift shield. This box is the same type of box with the same type of number design that were scattered throughout the Ox Group's secret vault in Utah that Val tried to lure the Thunderbolts into to die. And since this Ox Group weaponry is amongst all of these weapons smuggled from Europe, then it's likely that Ox Group also deals weapons to other nations outside of the United States on the side. But anyways, after additional agents slowly approach Jess with heavy gunfire, we can see a gray box on the side that says the words munition Subcaliberig, which is German for subcaliber munitions.
Which of course in German means a whale's vagina.
But yeah, the two defenders would go on to blow up the Kingpin's weapons storehouse before Matt comes back to the Punisher's safe house just in time to stop Karen from turning Benjamin's head into a donut. This of course causes Karen to crash the fuck out even more, telling Matt that he always prioritizes his enemies over the people that love him, which is kind of true, but very much unfair. Shifting things to the reception of Vanessa's funeral proceedings, Governor McCaffrey begins suggesting to Sheila that she could become the next mayor of New York City with her help, alluding to her plans to kick Kingpin off of his throne. Meanwhile, Buck Cash Money Cashman pulls Daniel Blake aside and warns him that his relationship with BB Urick may be compromising the Fisk administration. And in order to see whether or not BB is trustworthy, Buck recommends that Daniel use the old barium meal test, a deliberate disinformation technique that intelligence agencies use to feed a suspected mole or double agent a unique piece of false information, in the hopes that the mole will expose themselves after divulging this fake information to the enemy. It's named after the real-life medical barium meal test, which is when patients swallow a thick, chalky drink containing barium that coats the inside of the throat, stomach, and intestines so doctors can clearly see any problems like ulcers or blockages during x-ray exams. In America, we call this particular spy technique a canary trap instead, and Daniel would set the trap for BB when he tells her the lie that Fisk is not aiming to go for a second term as mayor. And of course, elsewhere at the function, a tearful Heather Glenn makes her way to Vanessa's former bedroom, deciding to steal one of Vanessa's earrings for herself because rent is due and living in New York ain't cheap. I'm just kidding. She just wants a little something to remember Vanessa by. And after this, we see her approach Vanessa's mirror as the camera tilts and whispering voices get progressively louder in her head. And while these whispers are likely just showing us Heather's further descent into madness, we can't ignore the possibility that these whispers could be the doing of Heather Glenn's attacker Muse from beyond the grave. I know, it sounds insane, but Muse did something similar to this all the way from hell in the pages of the 2025 series Daredevil Unleash Hell Red Band with a woman by the name of Morgan Whittier, with Muse connecting with Morgan's soul to mold her physical form into the new female Muse. And I'm not saying that this is exactly what's happening to Heather here, but given that particular precedent and these strange whispers, we cannot ignore that particular possibility. But yeah, Heather would soon be joined by Buck Cashman, who immediately senses that something is disturbing Heather outside of Vanessa's own death, before learning how deeply Heather's own experience with enhanced masked psychos has left her scarred and traumatized. And in order to help her release some of her frustration, Buck encourages her to violently reenact what happened to her using his own neck. And much like with Deborah Ann Wall, I have got to give Margarita Levieva her props on this episode, man. Like, holy shit, can that woman act? But what's not so great about this moment is how Buck is actively encouraging Heather to give in to her inner rage in order for her to overcome her trauma. But anybody with media literacy that has seen a Star War knows that giving into the dark side is a bad idea. And Margarita knows all about the dark side, as she starred as a dark side witch in the Acolyte TV series not too long ago. She was great in that too. But given this Daredevil series' overall theme of rebirth, it seems like Heather herself is due for a bit of a violent rebirth in her own right, much like Karen Page is. But anyways, time passes and BB travels with Daniel to his mom's house to celebrate his birthday with him. And outside the house, we can see that his mom proudly displays a Fisk campaign sign, a sign clearly modeled after Donald Trump's own real-life campaign signs. Another way that this show alludes to how Fisk is meant to be a commentary on America's president, even if the showrunner publicly insists that it isn't supposed to be just about him. And while on a trip to the bathroom, BB takes a detour into Daniel's bedroom, where we can see posters repping his love for sneakers, as well as New York sports teams like the New York Yankees, Jets, and Knicks. And we can also see Daniel's admiration for mobsters through this Public Enemies poster, featuring the faces of Al Scarface Capone, Bugsy Siegel, Pretty Boy Floyd, Frank Costello, the original Machine Gun Kelly, John Dillinger, Babyface Nelson, and Lucky Luciano. And next to that poster is a poster for the 2001 stoner comedy How High, featuring rappers Method Man and Redman. But it would be after seeing a picture of Daniel with his father that BB decides to not text that false scoop that Daniel fed to her. However, BB would still be confronted by Daniel after he finds the same SD card that was handed off to her the night of the big fight, which is one element of this show that I find absolutely ridiculous. Like, are you kidding me, BB? You're really just gonna keep this piece of incriminating evidence in your jacket pocket at all times? Like, why didn't you just download the files and then wipe the card, you big dummy? But anyways, meanwhile, things get messy outside of City Hall, where a vigil for Vanessa Fisk turns into a resistance protest. And as Kingpin stares out the window at all the angry people, Buck informs him that the governor is withdrawing her support, just as Karen and the gang light a projection featuring a compilation of of all the Red Hook survivors telling their stories of mistreatment under Fisk. And I love how white and red light hits Kingpin right during this moment, as these two clashing colors seem to foreshadow the eventual showdown between the white Kingpin and the red Daredevil shortly after. And as Daredevil confronts Kingpin in front of his favorite painting, he shows that he's taken Karen's words to heart and offers to end their toxic rivalry once and for all by suggesting that they both leave New York City forever. But since Big Willie No Wife ain't willing to do that, the two of them start punching each other, a fight that eventually leads to Kingpin ruining his favorite Rabbit in a Snowstorm painting by throwing a blind man into it in a fit of rage. He would then proceed to punch Matt in the face, causing a bit of Matt's blood to splatter on that painting, joining Wilson's blood from the time that Daredevil beat Kingpin up in Netflix Daredevil Season 3. The two of them fight some more before Daredevil ends the fight with a knee to Willie's face. And meanwhile, outside of the protest, Buck gives the task force the green light to start firing at innocent protesters, with Powell immediately using the opportunity to eliminate Agent Saunders for giving Matt and Karen the keycard that led to the escape of the Red Hook prisoners. And before disposing of him, Powell calls Saunders a Fredo, a reference to the traitorous Fredo Corleone from the Godfather films. And as Karen Page and Angela Del Toro walked amongst the crowd of protesters, you can see that Angela is wearing a white tiger themed bandana, while Karen is wearing a red bandana to represent Daredevil. However, the way that Karen wears that bandana is very reminiscent of Daredevil's former love interest Elektra, who also wore a red mouth covering in both the comics and Netflix Daredevil. However, as the chaos intensifies outside, Angela's homie would be brutally wounded by the task force before Powell discovers wanted fugitive Karen Page at gunpoint, alluding to Karen's capture by the task force. And I cannot wait to see how Daredevil reacts to this new development in the episodes to come, because I'm sure your boy is really regretting not ending Kingpin's life right then and there after learning of Karen's capture. What's going on, my Daredevils? It's me, MT, and welcome back to yet another heavy spoilers breakdown of Daredevil Born Again Season 2. Today we're breaking down Episode 7, titled The Hateful Darkness, an episode that featured the grand return of Matt Murdock, as well as the grand sacrifice of a life for the love of a friend. And like always, we're going to recap the episode while diving into certain details that you may have missed and theorizing what's to come for next week's grand finale and beyond. So let's get into it. And as the sun rises over the streets of New York at the start of the episode, we can actually get a look at New Avengers Tower on the horizon, which is actually nice to see. We are then brought to the aftermath of the chaos of City Hall that we saw unfold at the end of last episode. And as we get shots of the streets of the city, we get this shot of one of the City Hall columns. I mean, this detail is probably super insignificant, but I did notice that the word spider was written in white text on one of these black bands circling around a pillar. And while it's likely that this could just be the name of the company that produced this object, this could also very well be a small nod to New York's other favorite spider, the Amazing Spider-Man, a character that Marvel Studios can't specifically mention in any of their projects outside of their deal with Sony Pictures. But we have, of course, gotten slight nods to Spider-Man in Daredevil Born Again before, like how Kingpin briefly did so in the second episode of last season.
We know how to take care of ourselves. We don't need a gun-toting vigilante who wears a skull on his chest, or a man who dresses in a spider outfit.
And right before David Bowie's It Ain't Easy starts playing in the background, Daredevil uses his super ears to scan through various news sources covering last night's mayhem. The first female reporter that we hear says the words, "last night's attack on City Hall by criminals," a framing that intentionally makes the protesters the aggressors and the anti-vigilante task force the innocent victims just trying to defend themselves. On the other hand, right after this, we hear a male news reporter refer to the people outside of City Hall as protesters, a subtle way to continue showing how biased and divided the media is in regards to their own position on the Fisk administration, presenting the side that they believe in as the most righteous in their actions, much like what happens in real life. And during this news report scan, we also learn that the events of the night before left 3 people injured and 2 dead, with the 2 dead likely referring to Agent Alan Saunders, whose head we saw get popped off by Psycho Task Force Agent Powell, as well as Angela Del Toro's friend Javi Espinosa, whose head that Karen Page found bleeding after Javi was brutally bonked on the head. And the last reporter voice that we hear in the background then claims that, quote, Mayor Fisk vows to restore order to the city. And Fisk proves that dedication to order during his spiteful visit to see the newly incarcerated Karen Page. Kingpin starts off by telling Karen that she has taken people from him, with Kingpin, of course, referring to his old right-hand man Wesley, who had his shirt absolutely ruined when he was Swiss cheesed by Karen Gage in episode 11 of the first season of Netflix Daredevil. But luckily for Wesley's corpse, corpse, he could just buy an even better shirt over at the Heavy Spoilers merch store. Maybe even one of our Daredevil Born Again inspired shirts, like our new Fearless t-shirt inspired by the Man Without Fear himself, or maybe even our newer Deadly Aim t-shirt inspired by Bullseye. We've got all that and so much more over at the Heavy Spoilers merch store, so stop by heavyspoilers.shop today to get you some. Karen then responds by mocking how scared the Kingpin looks in between her prison bars, as well as in the eyes of the public after the previous night's violence. This comment then rage baits Kingpin enough into grabbing Karen by the throat and claiming that what Karen mistakes as fear is actually a renewed resolve for order, which is an excuse that many fascist leaders use in order to justify the use of excessive force and unjust incarcerations. This idea of order also very much matches Kingpin's white color scheme, which seeks to paint him as a divine angel championing righteousness. This, of course, is a stark contrast to Daredevil's own red color scheme, which ironically paints him as a symbol of fear and chaos as the Crimson Devil of Hell's Kitchen, striking terror in the hearts of anyone who dare seek to escape the judgment of Lady Justice. Like a wolf in sheep's clothing, Wilson is actually chaos wearing the clothing of order, while Daredevil is a sheep in wolf's clothing, order wearing the clothing of chaos and fear. The two of them complement each other like a yin-yang in that way. But beyond Karen getting her throat yoinked by Kingpin, another element that truly surprised me during this confrontation is just how defiant Karen is in the face of the most terrifying man in New York City. Well, besides Sentry anyway. Like, bro literally had Karen by the throat like she was Bart Simpson in the 90s, and that crazy bitch was just smiling, even in the face of possible death. That moment right there is such a fantastic example of how Karen Page, much like many of the other characters in this series, has been born again during this new era. Like, just thinking back to the early days of Netflix Daredevil and seeing just how terrified Karen used to be of Fisk and his power, it's so crazy to see just how much her character has evolved from being a frightened victim to a defender of truth and justice to now being a full-blown seeker of revenge. Like, hard times really do have the capacity to change and evolve us into completely new beings. And that is very much the crux of the Marvel Universe, to be completely honest. The grand design, one might say, much like Vanessa Fisk did when she was sipping on that pineapple drink on her deathbed. I mean, Marvel Studios did effectively make a whole Avengers movie about this concept with Avengers Age of Ultron. In that film, Ultron chastises the Avengers for not allowing humanity to experience hard times. You know, like the time the Avengers stopped S.H.I.E.L.D. from dropping nukes on New York in Avengers 1, or that time that Captain America stopped Hydra from dropping nukes across the world in Captain America the First Avenger, or how Captain Marvel stopped the Kree from dropping alien nukes on the planet in Captain Marvel 1. And that's exactly why Ultron was drawn towards mutants like Wanda and Pietro Maximoff, as their incredibly rough past as survivors of war would begin to trigger their mutant powers. And this very much ties to what I was saying before about order and chaos. Through the chaos of hard times comes growth, which gives one the power to restore what they believe as order by undergoing a radical change. And this never-ending barrage of chaotic change is exactly what makes life worth living. And without it, a universe of constant order would be never changing and boring as hell. That being said, order and chaos are not opposites, but two halves that work together to promote evolution, much like what Vision tells Ultron at the end of Avengers 2.
Humans are odd. They think order and chaos are somehow opposites and try to control what won't be. But there is grace in their failings. I think you missed that.
They're doomed.
Yes. But a thing isn't beautiful because it lasts.
And these concepts of order and chaos are so important to Marvel lore that they've established two big-headed cosmic entities to embody these concepts and push the cosmos along, with their names being appropriately Master Order and Lord Chaos, deities that have been in charge of manufacturing the balance and evolution of the entire cosmos. Master Order is pictured as a big, bald, white face, much like Kingpin's, while Lord Chaos is depicted as a darkened, monstrous-looking face, much like how Daredevil is depicted as a demon, which is kind of funny. But in a similar but much smaller scale, Karen herself is evolving to meet the challenges of her time, undergoing a violent rebirth, much like how New York has evolved and gotten tougher from Kingpin's brutal rule. But anyways, after the intro, the time is 8:20 a.m. when a sleeping Mr. Charles is jolted awake by a pissed off Jessica Jones. Apparently, Mr. Chuck fell asleep reading an issue of Pan National Airlines magazine, with the words "Travel to Asia" being printed on the cover, pointing to Mr. Charles potentially heading to Asia for his next CIA mission. This pan-national magazine is actually a slight nod towards the Amazing Spider-Man 2 film featuring Andrew Garfield and Jamie Foxx. In that film, Electro decides to knock the power out of New York City, leading to the near collision of Pan-National Flight 273 with another plane.
New York approach. This is Pan-National 273 on approach. How do you hear? Approach, do you copy?
Radio's working, it's not us.
And before Jessica could get a chance to ram a size 10 boot up his frightened rectum, Mr. Charles insists that the heavily armed government agents that were sent to her house were only supposed to tell Jessica to back off, which is a bold-faced lie in my opinion, because like I said before, those goons were packing. Jessica then begins to threaten Mr. Charles by grabbing him, but Mr. Charles tells her that a little birdie told him that her powers have been on the fritz, with that little birdie of course alluding towards Mike Coulter's Luke Cage. Mr. Charles then tells Jessica that Luke Cage is currently out of the country on a special mission for him. And while he doesn't give her an exact location of where Luke is or what kind of work he's doing for the American government, we do know that Luke Cage's comic book counterpart is no stranger to working for sketchy government entities in the past. Back in the year 1984, we learned that Luke was once a temporary agent for a secret government group known as Special Military Intelligence Law Enforcement Division, or SMILE for short. In issue 112 of Power Man and Iron Fist, we see how SMILE blackmails both Luke Cage and Iron Fist into going on a top secret mission for them. And in 2004's Secret War run, no relation to Secret Wars, we see Nick Fury recruiting Luke Cage along with a few other superheroes to go on a secret mission to Latveria to eliminate Latveria's current leader, a woman by the name of Lucia von Bardis. However, because that mission would end up with a tremendous loss of innocent Latverian lives, Nick Fury would then choose to wipe the memories of all the members of his secret superhero strike force so that they could live in ignorance of what they helped cause. But Lucia von Bardis would end up surviving the attack on her life, retaliating by exploding Luke Cage and putting him in a coma. But anyways, if Luke Cage is on a mission overseas, then maybe Mr. Charles's magazine is Marvel's way of teasing that Luke Cage is on a mission somewhere in the continent of Asia. However, as Asia is a massive freaking continent, it's tough to really pin down what country he would be in if this is even the case. But at any rate, I can safely say that whatever Luke Cage is seeking to gain out of his involvement with Mr. Charles and Contessa Val's CIA, it's for sure to end badly, especially after seeing just how nonchalant Val was when she was attempting to incinerate the members of the Thunderbolts after she was done using their skills for her own gain. But anyways, Mr. Charles then tells Jess that Kingpin very likely plans to assassinate Governor McCaffrey in order to stop her from pulling the plug on Fisk's entire administration. News that Jess brings to Daredevil immediately. And when the two meet up again, Jess comments how odd it is that Matt decided to meet on yet another rooftop. A hilarious nod towards how the Daredevil series has been historically obsessed with rooftop settings for conversation and action. The two of them are then met by Cherry, who seems to be recovering well after his heart attack wrote him out of most of the season. He tells Matt that Karen is formally booked and is being held at the 15th precinct, and that she was recently visited by the mayor himself while he's in the process of fast-tracking Karen's own rigged vigilante trial. And to avoid Daredevil being further painted as a law-breaking criminal, Cherry advises against Matt breaking Karen out, and instead reaches out to Matt's old 15th precinct pal, Brett Mahoney, who we see played once again by actor Royce Johnson in this episode. We last saw Detective Sergeant Mahoney chasing down Frank Castle in season 2 of The Punisher before the grand wave of Marvel Netflix cancellations. Brett Mahoney uses his influence to briefly let Karen out of her cell to go outside to talk to Matt, who fortunately cannot see the marks that Karen now has on her skin after Kingpin had her by the neck. They apologize to each other for their intense argument the previous episode before discussing how the mayor intends to publicly shame and humiliate Karen in front of the world on live television. And seeing how Karen helped humiliate Kingpin the same way in the past, such an action serves as a petty way of Kingpin getting what he believes to be just revenge. And speaking of Kingpin, we see Heather Glenn pop by his office to pay her former client a visit. She gives Kingpin some encouraging words before the mayor pulls out one of Vanessa's earrings from his desk, the matching earring that Heather impulsively stole during Vanessa's funeral. The mayor rejects Heather's apology and instead low-key applauds her impulsive nature, something that he can personally relate to. I mean, after all, he did impulsively attack Karen earlier in the episode. Heather would of course take the mayor's words to heart when she does a bit of Karen hurting of her own later on in the episode, giving into her impulsivity completely during Karen's post-trial psych eval. During that evaluation, Karen decides to mock Heather's previous insecurities about her ex-boyfriend Matt Murdock, triggering Heather to go full on professional impulsivity mode. episode, bringing up how Karen killed her younger brother Kevin Page in the past. But while Heather tries to make it look like Karen intentionally did that to her brother, those of us who have seen episode 10 of Netflix Daredevil season 3 know that Kevin Page died during an accidental car crash.
Watch out!
Butterbean okay?
Heather pretends to console Karen by implying that Karen hurt Kevin in retaliation for him violating her in the past, before bringing up how Karen must have felt powerful after getting revenge on James Wesley. And this line of questioning seems to be a fairly obvious bit of projection on Heather's part, as she is actually the one who is slowly learning how powerful it feels to enact violence against people who hurt her, much like Buck Cashman encouraged her to do in Vanessa's room the day that she stole Vanessa's earrings. Heather then brings up how Karen has allowed herself to be manipulated by men throughout her entire life, with the mention of Frank Castle's name causing Karen to tell Heather to shut the hell up, a reaction that Heather finds curious, implying that Karen may have some unaddressed feelings towards the Punisher. Karen fires back by bringing up Vanessa Fisk and how pathetic Heather was for attaching herself to the Fisk family just because she got her heart broken by Matt. This then leads us to getting yet another surprise appearance of the ghost of Muse, who we see in the window of the meeting room in the background silently encouraging Heather to go apeshit. And apeshit Heather goes, bitch slapping Karen in the face like she owed her money for pitying her as a victim. Slap, slap.
Slap, slap, slap. Clap, clap, clap.
But backtracking a bit, during the day of Karen's actual trial, Karen's lawyer, Kirsten McDuffy, dramatically calls in her partner Matt Murdoch to help her, with Spectrum News yet again broadcasting the vigilante trial live to Kingpin's office. And after Matt asks Officer Powell a few questions, Kirsten questions Cole North, who brings up the dope Daredevil Punisher team-up fight in Matt's old apartment that we saw at the end of last season, before said apartment exploded, leaving Cole's face severely scarred. Kirsten asks North if Powell or Kingpin ordered him to kill the previous White Tiger, Hector Ayala, which we saw North do at the end of episode 3 of Born Again season 1. Kirsten's words during this trial appear to affect Governor McCaffrey, who then immediately informs Attorney General Steve Rudd that she's going ahead with her plans to kick Fisk out of City Hall. However, later that night, in retaliation, one of Kingpin's assassins would attempt to silence the governor forever by choking her out, only for her to be saved by an atonement-seeking Bullseye at the request of Daredevil. And with Bullseye having saved the governor from getting choked out by this assassin, I feel like the chances of Benjamin Poindexter getting approached by Mr. Charles shot up significantly, because much like we discussed before, Mr. Charles seems to be collecting enhanced people and deploying them on missions around the world. So with Bullseye now a free man looking for a sense of purpose, he is the perfect target to be used by Mr. Charles, much like Black Widow's sister Yelena was for Val when she was looking for purpose in her own life. But much like I brought up in a previous video, I can also see Val throwing Bullseye on the New Avengers temporarily in order to act as her own personal spy, much like how Amanda Waller ordered Peacemaker to keep an eye on the Suicide Squad in James Gunn's Suicide Squad film over on the DC side of things. But anyways, after the big trial, the AVTF wastes no time in attempting to eliminate Murdoch and McDuffy by sending their goons to gun him down. But luckily, Angie, Kim, and Cherry would safely escort Kirsten and Karen away before Matt himself gets hit by one of these flying bullets. But instead of getting his wound patched up immediately, Matt would limp his ass over to Clinton Church, praying to St. Jude instead, the patron saint of desperate cases and impossible situations. And St. Jude appears to instantly answer his prayers by bringing Jessica Jones in to help him in his hour of need, teasing yet another team up for the season finale that I am super excited for. And we of course cannot end this breakdown without talking about poor Daniel Blake, because when we catch back up with Daniel and BB, we see him confronting BB about her betrayal while wearing a Stuyvesant speech and debate shirt, a school that very likely helped forge Daniel Blake's silver tongue that got him his job in the first place. The two of them exchange words before Daniel claims that the two of them need to find a safe house, a suggestion that causes BB to call Daniel Jason Bourne, a reference to the iconic franchise featuring Matt Damon.
Jason Bourne as Jesus Christ.
Daniel then lies to BB by saying that he knows a guy that can give them both a safe place to stay, while secretly planning to hand BB over to Buck. Daniel then drives BB to where he's supposed to drop her off and tells her about the dirty deed of disposing a dead dude with a deadly dapper British man. But when BB realizes what Daniel's doing, BB manages to talk Daniel out of it, leading Daniel to let her go, knowing full well that he just gave up his own life for hers. And despite everything Daniel has done in the past, I respect him hardcore for being a man and meeting up with Buck anyway. And while I'm sure Buck respected him in some degree as well, Buck would have no other choice but to attempt to beat the information out of him before gunning his favorite work buddy down. And man, was I devastated when Daniel died, man. I thought that Buck would show some sort of mercy and tell Daniel to leave the city and just disappear, but unfortunately, British Wesley is all business all of the time and would do what needs to be done for the kingpin of crime. And once BB learns that the Fisk regime has killed yet another person close to her, I feel like Homegirl is gonna crash the hell out and do something super dramatic to expose Fisk and his corrupt actions once and for all. Because I don't think she's gonna take another death sitting down. Like, I definitely feel like she's gonna fully unmask herself as the true face of City Without Fear and provide concrete proof that will change how the entire city perceives Kingpin forever. But like always, only time will tell there. What's going on, my Daredevils? It's me, MT, and welcome back to another Heavy Spoilers Breakdown. Today, we are going to be diving into the finale of Daredevil Born Again Season 2, a beautifully written finale that finally sees an end to Daredevil and Kingpin's war on the streets of New York. And like always, we are going to recap the episode while breaking down all of the details that you may have missed and all the Marvel Comics lore you should consider for what's possibly to come. So let's just get into it. Episode 8, titled The Southern Cross, starts with a flashback of Matt and Karen heading inside the Panatoo Garden Indian restaurant for another date. And we are first introduced to this restaurant in the 5th episode of Netflix Daredevil Season 2, when the two of them first started seeing each other. And since then, it's become one of their favorite spots to eat at, mostly because of the delightful smells and pretty lights. And during this flashback, we see Matt wearing a red shirt to match his red Daredevil theme, a color that we also see Karen wearing under her suit jacket when we are snapped back to the present day to the vigilante trial. A vigilante trial that Karen's lawyer Matt is late for no good reason. I'm kidding.
I'm joking. I'm joking.
He was getting a bullet removed and his leg stapled by a superpowered alcoholic inside of the former hideout of a mass murderer, as one tends to do. I mean, Jessica Jones is great and all, and I'm glad that she's here, but where's Claire Temple when you need her, man? We haven't seen that woman since Luke Cage Season 2. Claire had better return alongside the Defenders in Daredevil Season 3, or else me and Papa Feige are gonna have words. Words! Those words will likely be, I love you and please adopt me, but they will be words nonetheless. And when we first get to that hideout, we can see what appears to be a child's drawing of a black teddy bear, with the legs and left side of that teddy bear's torso being covered in red. And if I were to guess, I think that this black and red teddy bear was meant to reflect Matt's own black and red Daredevil costume, possibly as a subtle nod to the Daredevil parody, Daredevil, a character that was introduced in the pages of Secret Wars 2 from 2025, before Disney Plus would actually make a Daredevil Awake Again parody as part of promo for the second Zootopia movie. And I am willing to bet that this drawing was done by none other than Jessica Jones's daughter, Danielle Cage, who seems to have some bit of familiarity with Matt through her mom and dad.
How's she doing?
She's good. She's a handful.
Yeah.
And at the hideout, Jess asks Matt if he thinks that he's still able to bring down Fisk, to which Matt says that he cannot do it alone, especially if he's going to do it his way and not Jessica's way. Because if you remember from a previous episode, Jessica has not so subtly hinted that she believes that the only way New York City will be rid of Fisk is if Fisk is in a body bag, an act that Matt's Sunday School Murdoch cannot abide by. And speaking of Fisk and body bags, we then transition to the office of the mayor, where Buck informs the mayor that Daniel did not, in fact, turn in BB Urich like he said he would. And I've got to hand it to both actors in this scene, because even without saying a word about Daniel having to be put down, you can see the sadness so well on both of their faces, especially on Buck's face in particular, as he has grown quite fond of Daniel Blake and his street meat. Wait.
Get your mind out of the gutter.
But I bet Buck would cheer right up if he took a quick trip to the Heavy Spoilers merch store, where he can buy our 2 new Daredevil Born Again inspired shirts, repping both Daredevil and Bullseye respectively. And since Buck likes punching people to a bloody pulp, maybe our new Royal Regent shirt inspired by Invincible would be more his style. But I can also see Buck's James Bond looking ass wearing the shit out of our new incredibly designed 00 standard issue t-shirt. We've got all that and so much more over at the Heavy Spoilers merch store, so head on over to heavyspoilers.shop today. Back at the trial, District Attorney Hochberg questions his colleague in crime Heather Glenn on Karen Page's mental state after her evaluation. Heather falsely states that Karen Page has antisocial personality disorder, which is a mental health condition in which a person shows a persistent pattern of disregarding and violating the rights of others through various means like impulsivity, aggression, and or deceit, often with a lack of remorse, aka a sociopath like Mr. Hochberg says in the trial. And much like I brought up in last week's breakdown, this is once again Heather Glenn projecting her own mental problems onto Karen, and it is actually Heather herself that has slowly grown to be impulsive, aggressive, and deceitful. And after Matt finally arrives to court fashionably late, he does so wearing a red suit, matching his girlfriend's own red attire. Hochberg then continues by having Heather read a passage from her newest book, Men in Masks, The Psychology of Vigilantes, the book that she was actually working on back when she was in a relationship with Matt last season, even using Matt's experience with mass vigilantes to help her with her research. And we already know that Heather is already a published author, as she's previously released a book called Live Without Fear, A Guide to Confronting Trauma, which we saw her promoting last season when she was first approached by Muse. And after Heather's testimony, Matt Murdock decides to shock everybody and call Mayor White Square No Hair himself to the stand. And as he swears himself in, Wilson says his full government name, Wilson Grant Fisk, a middle name that would not be revealed to be part of Kingpin's name until decades after his first appearance in 1976's The Amazing Spider-Man issue number 50. Wilson's full name can be seen as early as the pages of 2001's Daredevil issue 15 through a 5-year-old Wilson Fisk's childhood drawings. Daredevil 15 is also the issue where we see Echo shoot Kingpin point blank in the eye, an element that we saw unfold in the Hawkeye TV series that explains why the mayor has a scar on his left eye. How he survived that point blank shot, the world may never know, but chances are it was probably Wheaties. He ate a lot of Wheaties as a child. A lot of Wheaties, because now he's the shape of a Wheatie. The mayor then starts off by saying this.
I was a boy.
A callback to Kingpin's iconic speech to Bullseye in Netflix Daredevil Season 3.
When I was a boy, I beat my father's skull in with a hammer.
The phrase "when I was a boy" was also said in episode 4 of last season of Born Again as well.
When I was a boy, I learned by watching my father.
The mayor then schmoozes to the public by claiming how much he loves and cherishes the legal system. A huge log of bullshit that would be exposed by episode's end when King Quadrilateral decides to symbolically park his Fisk fanny right in the center judge's seat during the quarantine later on. But before all of that happens, Matt Murdock would shock the public by pulling a surprise confession tape out of his ass. A tape that has first mate Christophe Sava snitching out Kingpin as the mover of all of the illegal ship cargo to Red Hook. And to corroborate the first mate story, Matt Murdock reveals himself to the media that he is Daredevil, in a fashion very similar to Tony Stark in Iron Man 1.
I am Daredevil.
I am Iron Man.
This moment seems to be inspired by the moment comic book Matt Murdock revealed his secret identity in the pages of Daredevil's issues number 35 and 36 from 2014. And that wasn't the first time that Daredevil's identity was revealed to the public. In fact, back in 1986's Daredevil 227, comic book Karen Page would actually trade Matt Murdock's secret identity to Kingpin for some illegal party powders, if you know what I mean. That girl was a junkie. However, even then, Kingpin would still make sure that only he knew Matt Murdock's secret until that information would eventually get leaked to the FBI in 2002's Daredevil issue 32. Eventually, Matt's identity would be leaked to the press, and that, combined with some other crazy shit that Matt had done in the comics, led him to serving some prison time, much like we see Matt do at the end of this episode. But fortunately for Matt, his buddy Iron Fist would throw everybody off of his scent when he decided to pretend to be Daredevil while Matt was incarcerated, which we see Danny doing in the pages of 2006's Daredevil 82 to around 87. That being said, with MCU Matt Murdock seeing himself serving prison time, much like his comic book counterpart, there is a chance that season 3 of Daredevil Born Again could see Finn Jones's Danny Rand kicking ass as the Devil of Hell's Kitchen in Matt's absence. I mean, it would be a really great way to reintroduce the character after the character's lukewarm reception during the Netflix days. And with Daredevil's testimony, Karen's trial is then dismissed, leaving Kingpin shocked and pissed off, but still confident that Matt Murdock has won absolutely nothing, mostly because he was expecting expecting a Murdoch to get murdered by a Bullseye cosplayer with a sniper rifle, a false flag attack that the mayor was also planning to use to bolster his anti-vigilante agenda while also getting rid of his mortal enemy once and for all. But unfortunately for Big Willie, the real Bullseye would stand up and end up taking down the AVTF agents staging the attack and take their place, planning on icing Wilson Fisk to really balance those scales that he wanted balancing, with Bullseye likely obtaining intel on Kingpin's plans to assassinate Murdoch through Mr. Charles and his CIA connections, as Mr. Charles is now very interested in getting rid of Wilson Fisk as a loose end after the mayor betrayed him and the CIA by stealing the weapons for himself. And another part of Mr. Charles' revenge plans, of course, involve Governor McCaffrey, who he motivated to pursue a litany of charges against Mayor Eggman. And after the governor confronts Fisk with all those charges directly after the trial, we see Kingpin have a quick conversation with Jessica Jones, remarking how she's aligned herself with Daredevil to try to take him down. To me, this feels like a not-so-veiled threat from the mayor to Jessica Jones, a threat that could possibly tease some type of future retaliation from Wilson Fisk in a future Jessica Jones related project. Because much like we've seen this season, Wilson Fisk is a petty man who will seek vengeance against anyone he perceives to be an enemy, very much like the political figure that he is not so subtly modeled after. But anyways, Kingpin goes to confront Matthew Murdock at the doors of the courthouse, right before Bullseye attempts to take his ass out. But luckily for Willie Rectangle, Buck Cashman would take the bullet in his stead, leaving the mayor to quarantine himself and his staff inside of the courtroom. There, the mayor would declare a state of emergency, claiming that he and the entire city were under siege and that he plans to stand firm and fight back. His transmission would then be immediately followed up by a transmission from BB Urich, where she appears to directly respond to the mayor's declaration before unmasking herself as the true face of City Without Fear and exposing the mayor for the murders of both her uncle Benjamin Urich as well as her best friend Daniel Blake. And speaking of Daniel Blake, it seems like his tragic death at the end of last episode was actually a last-minute change that the writers made in post-production. According to Michael Gandolfini himself, that scene was supposed to end with Buck sparing him and telling him to disappear from New York. However, because the writers and showrunners did not really feel like Daniel's story had anywhere else to go after that, they decided to digitally add a gunshot flare and some blood to the scene to give the character a definitive ending, which was definitely the right decision in my opinion, because better to die a hero than live long enough to become a useless background character. I'm talking to you, Hank Pym. It's time for you to go. But yeah, BB's message seems to resonate with the people of New York, enough for them to pull their pre-made Daredevil masks and pre-bought red bandanas out of their asses and march to City Hall like, we're not gonna take it. And while it is great that BB could have such an impact on the story, this is the one element of the series that had me like, all right, bro, really? Really? Like, you're telling me that within seconds of the mayor's live broadcast, you filmed and edited an entire YouTube video, and then that video just went instantaneously viral? Get out of here. Like, the only person in the MCU remotely capable of doing something like that fast got his ass Swiss cheesed by ChatGPT and Sokovia in Avengers 2. I don't believe it. But anyways, as the massive red swarm of resistance fighters gather outside the building, they all take the shape of Daredevil's devil-horned mask, as we can see here from the view of Courthouse Camera 9, another incredible piece of cinematography from this series. And meanwhile, inside the courtroom, the mayor orders the task force to make sure that both Matt Murdock and Karen Page are dead before they can ever leave the building, an order that everybody in the room can hear, including his former therapist, Heather Glenn, who noticeably does not object to the mayor's desire to eliminate innocent people, showing that she is already more than okay with the idea of her ex Matt Murdock being murdered, just for having emotionally hurt her. And we can see just how much Heather's trauma from Muse has made her extremely aggressive towards men that she finds predatory when she impulsively jabs District Attorney Hochberg in the throat just for touching her. Everything about Heather Glenn's mental decline into donning the mask of Muse herself by the end of the episode points to Heather's potential villainous motivations in Daredevil Born Again Season 3, because much like how Bastion Cooper became Muse after having been inspired by Heather's book, Live Without Fear, A Guide to Confronting Trauma, it seems that Heather will be seeking to live without the fear of being hurt by masked and duplicitous men, specifically by hunting down and hurting them as the new Muse, becoming the very person at the root of her immense and intense trauma. Like, it has been so incredible to see Heather's terrified mind seek to regain control of its own reality in this way over the course of this season, because I was kind of worried that her character would have absolutely nothing to do this season and would just be relegated to the petty ex-girlfriend cliche. Because even though the character Heather Glenn has never taken the mantle of Muse in the comics, I personally believe having Heather become the next Muse in the MCU is incredibly incredibly smart, as it allows us to get more showdowns between Daredevil and Muse after Born Again Season 1 killed off such an incredibly amazing character so quickly. And it's also incredibly fitting that Heather becomes Muse herself, considering that she was the Muse of the original Muse. So having the ghost of Muse be her Muse for her future actions as the new Muse is super poetic. The former Muse becomes the artist, and the former artist becomes the Muse from Beyond the Grave. And speaking of Beyond the Grave, with Heather's new turn as Muse, there's a major question that we all have to ask ourselves. Is Heather's turn to the dark side merely the result of her own horrible mental health, or is there a supernaturally sinister force at play influencing her? Because much like I brought up in a previous breakdown, the pages of Daredevil Unleash Hell Red Band #1 from 2025 introduced us to a woman named Morgan Whittier, a frustrated artist that would be connected to Muse from Beyond the Grave, with Muse manipulating her into becoming the next Muse all the way from hell. And while it's not exactly clear whether or not the same thing is happening with Heather in the MCU, considering how the MCU is heading towards a dark supernatural direction with projects like Blade and the Midnight Suns on the horizon and heavy hitters like Mephisto having just been introduced, I would not be surprised if it's revealed that Muse is directly interfering with Heather's mind from the afterlife. I mean, even though he wasn't manipulated by a dead man, the Shang-Chi film saw Ten Rings leader Wenwu be influenced by the Dweller in Darkness, who was a dark being trapped in a cave all the way in a neighboring universe. So if the MCU wanted to go down a similar route with Heather, they could do so. Anyways, outside of the courthouse, Cole North finally makes himself useful this season by bonking Officer Powell in the head after realizing that he was blindly following the orders of a psychopath, the same psycho that ordered him to eliminate Angela's uncle Hector Ayala last season. And as the people start making their way to the mayor, he prepares to confront them personally after rejecting the governor's offer to resign and renounce his citizenship, which was a pretty damn good deal. And when Kingpin opens the door, I love how he greets the resistance by saying, before showing them that he is very much exactly the big, bad, bald, butchering boogeyman that they all feared that he was. Especially because that moment parallels Jessica Jones' trick or treat line that she says to Matt while throwing him his costume.
Trick or treat.
And guys, the hallway fight sequence that follows from both Team Daredevil and Kingpin were absolutely insane! Like, Kingpin going berserk on all of those Resistance members was literally one of the coolest and most badass things that I have seen on television in a long while. Like, it is crazy how Big Bro would rather go full berserk mode and go on a mayoral murder spree than consider stepping down and leaving New York forever. Like, that is absolutely unhinged behavior. Like, did you see what he did to that man's back on the wall? Like, I'm no doctor, but I am pretty sure that man will never pee standing up ever again. But I especially appreciated how each hallway was tinted with the appropriate color theme for each of them, with Daredevil's hallway being covered in a red light while Kingpin's is covered in normal white light. And it was also incredibly cool to see Angelo Del Toro's White Tiger in action alongside Daredevil and Jessica Jones, and I cannot wait to see what Marvel has in store for her character in future projects. What project she will appear in next is anybody's guess, but considering that the character is a young teenage hero, one of the easiest assumptions one could make for Angelo Del Toro's future is for her to be a part of whatever team Kamala Khan is forming alongside Kate Bishop, with all signs pointing towards a Champions project down the line. I mean, we were all sort of assuming it was going to be a Young Avengers project, but given how old all these actors are going to be by the time their project comes out, I'm not too sure if they'll all be young enough to be known as the Young Avengers, if you know what I mean. And we could also potentially see White Tiger pop up in Spider-Man Brand New Day, potentially fighting alongside Spider-Man against the Hand. I mean, there is a popular theory on the internet that the shot of Spider-Man jumping at the hand ninjas in the Spider-Man Brand New Day trailer has a hero edited out, much like how Toby and Andrew were edited out of the Spider-Man No Way Home trailer when Peter faced off against the Sinister Five. But chances are Daredevil Born Again Season 3 will be where we will see Angelo Del Toro in full White Tiger attire with her own mask and everything, likely courtesy of Daredevil's connections with West Coast superhero suit designer Luke Jacobson, who Daredevil represented in court in the She-Hulk series. But regardless, we would see Kingpin's rule come to an end right as Daredevil and Jessica Jones save Humpty Dumpty from cracking his head and being thrown off of the wall by force. And my absolute favorite image of the episode comes when Daredevil and Kingpin are kneeling on the ground face to face with one another, as they are symbolically positioned to act as opposing reflections of one another. Daredevil with his black and red, and Kingpin with his white and gold. And with Kingpin's surrender, we get an incredibly poetic ending for our hero and villain set to Radiohead's Pyramid Song, as Daredevil is forced to suffer being separated from the love of his life to do time in prison, while Kingpin is forced to suffer being separated from the love of his life forever, while still being able to enjoy his freedom. The devil is left in a dark hell filled with sinners, while the false angel is allowed to live in paradise. Ain't that some bullshit? And while we don't exactly know what's next in store for a recently imprisoned and outed Matt Murdock, you can for sure expect his fellow inmate Powell to try to get some type of revenge on Matt while they're locked up together. But if that does end up happening, I would not expect Cole North to be involved in any retaliation efforts whatsoever, because he seems like he's okay with being where he's at, and has taken full accountability for his misguided actions as part of the anti-vigilante task force. Him giving Matt a nod as they walk past each other in prison seems to be a sign that Cole might end up being one of the few allies that Matt has while locked up, because God knows how many people in that prison are in there because of Daredevil's actions. Like, I cannot imagine the amount of enemies this guy has now that everybody knows his secret identity. And the ending of this episode also features the much anticipated return of Mike Colter as Luke Cage, his grand return to the MCU following the cancellation of the Luke Cage series and Marvel Netflix as a whole. And the last time we saw Luke Cage in season 2 of his show, Luke had just crowned himself the new sheriff of Harlem following the death of Mariah Dillard, using her old nightclub as the headquarters of his operation. But a little bit after that, we did see Luke Cage give Jessica some wise advice during a small cameo in episode 13 of Netflix Jessica Jones season 3. But in that time, he appears to have been recruited to do work with Mr. Charles and the CIA, work that he tells Jessica has come to an end as he greets his two favorite ladies at Jessica's Alias Investigations office. Danielle Cage can be seen wearing a yellow dress this time around, fittingly matching the yellow color scheme of her father. And during the conversation, Luke seems to be unsure whether or not Jessica has moved on in his absence, which tells me that the two of them might not be married like they are in the comics. Actually, comic book Luke Cage would actually propose to Jessica mere minutes after the birth of Danielle in the pages of The Pulse issue 13, but it does not seem like MCU Luke did the same. And it would honestly make sense if they weren't engaged or married quite yet, considering that such an event would be best shown on screen in a future Alias Investigations or Luke Cage series, or even in the inevitable Defenders follow-up that we are going to get, considering that we are set to see a reunion of the Defenders cast sometime over the course of Daredevil Born Again season 3, with that revelation of course being confirmed by Luke Cage actor Mike Colter online, inevitably forcing Kevin Feige to whip out the belt. But regardless, like I brought up in last week's breakdown, even though Luke Cage believes that he's done with whatever work he's been doing with the CIA, I can guarantee you that the CIA and Val are not done with him, because much like we saw in the Thunderbolts, Val does not like herself loose ends. So much like she attempted to incinerate assets like Yelena, John Walker, Ava Starr, and Antonia Dreykov, I can also see Val attempting to do away with Luke Cage somehow, depending on what he's done for her. Or maybe we could potentially see Mr. Charles nudging Luke towards City Hall in a future run for mayor, possibly going head-to-head with Sheila Rivera, who seemingly appears to become mayor after Kingpin's downfall in the first trailer of Spider-Man Brand New Day, where we can see her handing Spider-Man a key to the city, because being a kingmaker is part of Mr. Charles's whole deal. So I can totally see him wanting to put one of his former assets in City Hall so Luke can help him, much like Mayor Fisk was supposed to. And of course, one of the main reasons why I even bring up Luke Cage running for mayor is because of recent set leaks from Daredevil Born Again season 3 that shows Mike Colter wearing an outfit similar to the one comic book Luke Cage wore on a variant cover of Devil's Reign number 6. Luke Cage would actually become mayor shortly after Kingpin's downfall in the Devil's Reign series in the pages of Devil's Reign Omega number 1 from 2022, with Devil's Reign of course being the story run that the Daredevil Born Again series has been based on so far. So Luke Cage running for mayor and winning could be something on the agenda for season 3. But speaking of people working for Mr. Charles, like I theorized in a previous breakdown, it seems like Mr. Charles has indeed recruited Bullseye for his next mission overseas, officially making Bullseye a government asset once again, despite having been a recently escaped prisoner and political assassin. So that right away tells me that whatever deal Mr. Charles is making with enhanced people like Bullseye and Luke Cage is very much unsanctioned by any official government entity. Like, I smell some plausible deniability, Black Ops, Suicide Squad type bullshit afoot. And that's pretty much how Contessa Val likes to roll, as we have seen her use enhanced agents like John Walker, Ghost, and Taskmaster on Black Ops missions in the past in the name of national security. Mr. Charles is referred to as Mr. Robertson when the flight attendant tells him that he's now part of the Million Miler Club at Van Lunt Airlines. And since I could not really find any particular Mr. Robertson in the comics that would match up with his character, it's safe to say that this Mr. Robertson name is simply an alias that Mr. Charles uses whenever he has to, so he can truly operate without leaving a trail. The Van Lunt Airlines logo on all of the airplane seats was also featured on the promo banners for the mayor's big fight against Matterhorn Menendez, as we can see here. This inclusion of Van Lunt Airlines is super significant, as it points to a bit of an obscure Marvel villain known as Cornelius Van Lunt, a criminal businessman who founded the syndicate known as the Zodiac Cartel. With the Zodiac Cartel being modeled after the 12 signs of the Zodiac, Cornelius Van Lunt would adopt the codename Taurus, while his 11 other homies would then take the names of the other Zodiac signs. And because they were all a bunch of weirdos, they would also dress up as their specific Zodiac sign as well, with Cornelius Van Lunt dressing up like a bull. But anyways, each member of the Zodiac Cartel would each claim a particular city as their playground to do illegal shit. And New York City has historically been the domain of comic book Cornelius's operations. But most importantly, Cornelius Van Lunt has already been influencing the MCU in the shadows since the days of Netflix Marvel. Because back in episode 10 of Netflix Daredevil season 1, Kingpin would host a fundraiser at the Van Lunt building. And at that fundraiser, Kingpin's business partner Leland Owsley would tell Vanessa how Cornelius Van Lunt and his astrologist would actually help corrupt politician Randolph Cherry become a senator. An Easter egg pointing to Van Lunt's connections to the astrologically obsessed Zodiac Cartel. But anyways, this all being said, with Van Lunt's influence already having been established, combined with the fact that Mr. Charles has flown 1,000,000 miles with Van Lunt Airlines over the course of his career, this all makes me suspect that Cornelius Van Lunt could be working alongside Mr. Charles and Contessa Val's CIA in order to bolster his own criminal enterprise, much like Fisk was trying to do with Red Hook. And hell, I would not even be surprised if it's revealed that Val is also part of the Zodiac Cartel as a full-fledged member down the line. Either way, definitely keep Cornelius Van Lunt and the Zodiac Cartel on your radar for potential future MCU villains. Villains that Daredevil and the Defenders might have to face off against in the future. And while it isn't exactly clear where exactly Mr. Charles and Bullseye are headed, it is possible that the two of them are headed to the continent of Asia. Because much like I mentioned in last week's breakdown, when Jessica Jones surprises Mr. Charles in his bedroom, he's reading a pan-national airlines magazine centered around the sights and scenes of Asia, which could possibly allude to where he's headed with Bullseye now. And if this happens to be true, I think it'd be really cool if Marvel Studios took this trip as an opportunity to bring another Daredevil villain to the MCU, the deadly Lady Bullseye. Because in Daredevil issue 111 from 2008, we learn how Bullseye once went on a mission to Tokyo, Japan to take out members of the Yakuza. A little Japanese girl being trafficked by the Yakuza would watch as Bullseye took out her captors with precision before she would be set free. And ever since then, she would dedicate her life to becoming as deadly as him, eventually joining the Hand as one of their most deadly and sneaky operatives. This all being said, I can totally see Marvel Studios having Bullseye go to Tokyo on a top secret mission, and possibly coming back from this mission with a young Japanese sidekick, training her to become just like him. Because at this point in Bullseye's journey, he doesn't really have anyone close who understands him. And judging by his past, he sort of craves that type of connection. So I could totally see him taking a young person and making them his assassin protege, much like how Clint Barton took Kate Bishop under his wing. And speaking of the Hawkeyes, if Marvel made this move, it would be incredibly dope if they greenlit a Hawkeye season 2 that had Clint and Kate go head-to-head against Bullseye and Lady Bullseye. I'm just saying, Marvel, it's a matchup that everybody wants to see eventually, so why not now? And of course, before the episode ends, we see BB getting situated in her uncle's old office at the New York Bulletin, an office that features New York Bulletin headlines covering both the attack on New York by Loki from Avengers 1, as well as the Incredible Hulk's battle with the Abomination in the 2008 Incredible Hulk film. So it's safe to say that we'll be seeing more of BB Yorick in Defenders-related projects, which is very good news for me because Janaea Walton is fine as hell. But all in all, this was an incredible season of Daredevil Born Again, and everybody involved deserves an Emmy for their phenomenal work. Like, the season could not have come at a more relevant time in American history, as it encourages people to unite and stand up against those who wish to use fascist tactics to gain power. And watching Daredevil and the Resistance get to do that on screen definitely filled me with hope for a better tomorrow for all of us. But anyway, that is it for this breakdown of the Daredevil Born Again Season 2 finale. Let us know what you guys thought of the episode in the comment section down below. But like always, you guys can follow me at Mastertainment on Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, Twitch, wherever I am on the internet, but most importantly, follow Heavy Spoilers here on YouTube by hitting that subscribe button and maybe even hitting that like button if you guys enjoyed the video. But like always, I've been MT, you guys have been amazing, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye.